I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. I gotta be honest, the non-video podcasts are just so much. We got a cat here. This is just so much easier for me.
Why?
I can wear whatever I want, and I get like whatever. I'm not obsessed with what I look like or that I look presentable or whatever. But like, I could not wear what I'm wearing right now on a video podcast because I'm not trying to show my goods to everyone, but I'm like having a hot flash. I can sit however I want. I don't have to worry about making sure I'm in the frame. I'm sure I'm going to get used to it, but I feel like it adds and I don't feel this way about like live streams, but my live streams are always a mess. You know, they're kind of chaotic and it's fine. But this like finally, I am so hot right now. I feel like it's adding a level of self-consciousness, not like insecurity self-consciousness, but like having to be aware of things besides just talking.
Yeah.
That it does. I feel like it's added a stiffness to the podcast. And I think the main thing we want, and also it's maybe not super easy to have someone else in the room, even if I feel like obviously super comfortable with Coco. So I'm sure I'm going to get used to it, but I agree. It's definitely like there's a difference between doing the audio and the video, like the flow wise and feeling to be able to just kind of not have to think about as many things when you're doing audio. But I think it's something we just have to get used to. But also I think it's fine to just every now and then, it's like, I mean, especially right now when we've just been really busy and running around.
it's a little easier just to do audio in those moments. And I think we can, just do both.
Yeah,
whenever
just
it
kind
makes
of
sense.
in and out as we want. Yeah. So I think part of the reason we wanted to do video was so that we could get clips. But then I feel like the ones we recorded that were video, there weren't really any clippable moments because there has been like a stiffness. And maybe that stiffness is like more
there probably are clippable moments. It's just like, I need a producer that's just doing that all the time, because you have to then go through and find the clips, and then edit. And I enjoy doing that stuff when I'm feeling like it, but we get these done and I'm like, okay, done. Get it out and move on.
So I can edit audio, but I don't actually know how to use the video app. And then I am very visually impaired at this point in my life. And so your computer, the way you have your desk set up is like the actual screen is so far away.
She needs the screen 2 inches from her. I don't know if you've seen those kids that like game when they're playing gaming. The screen is literally like touching their nose. That's how it's not that far. It's literally like,
I think it's
a little farther than yours, and it's up.
And I'm actually
that's better
not
for your neck.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I am realizing how
autistic
specific
you are.
Yeah, exactly. How much I didn't. How like specific things have to be for me to feel like to be in my body is the only way I know how to describe it. My body is like, this is what my body is supposed to feel like when I'm doing this. And if it feels anything other than this, then I can't do it, And so it's just so funny that as I was helping Phoenix with sensory stuff as a toddler, I didn't identify. What the fuck is going on with my throat? I did not identify that I have insane sensory issues because I like don't have the thing where I can't handle a tag, or the seam on my socks, which is just what I associated with sensory stuff. But yeah, it's not even just like my vision. It's like for my brain to process the computer, I need to be able to move the screen. I need to be able to change my position. And that's just a very, like, for me to learn a new thing, I don't know how to explain it, but like, I can't be locked in that position. And I realized why school was so hard is because there was no variability in the environment in school. You were expected to be able to do things the way that you could do them. I need the lights to be a certain way. I need the sounds to be a certain way.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, and I'm saying this just as my personal experience. I'm not saying this is how you should adjust, but because I think there's two things. There is this like extra sensitivity thing, which is in the autistic bracket or neurodivergent, like hypersensitive, which I do have. I feel like I have a lot of those. But then there's times where like I know what you're talking about when there's like a specific way you need something to operate, to function and get like your mind open and being able to like actually function highly. But then there's times where I have like had things that like they take me over, like I need to fix it. So like as a kid, like the other day my mom was talking about making fun of how I used to have an issue with the sock seam when I was a kid, and it was like it took me over. Like I one day went to school with the sock seam messed up and I couldn't cross my toes. That's like all I wanted to be able to do, and I couldn't do it. And I couldn't function all day. I was freaking out.
It's because the shoes were too tight?
The shoes were too tight and the socks were probably too big, but they were all crooked. They were turned around, so it like had my foot all wound up. And so then the next time, this was like I was still young enough, my mom was putting my shoes on, but I vividly remember it. And so the next morning she was putting them on. I was like, no, the sock seam's messed up. You got to redo it. And she was like, okay. She redid it. And I was like, no, it's still messed up. And then for like 10 minutes, she's like trying to switch. And she's like, just go. You're fine. Like, you're going to be late. And I was hyper fixated on it for like a week. And then I don't know. I mean, I probably like as an adolescent, I still was like pretty sensitive to it. So every time I was putting my shoes on, I had to like make sure. But I think then life started to happen and like I would have to put shoes on and like go to a film thing or go like work. And then I was able to just like override that sensitivity because I had no other option. It was like, okay, just figure it out. You'll forget about it. And sure enough, when I stopped hyper focusing on it, it wasn't an issue. And then later in life, now it's not an issue. Like I don't have to have socks on. I can wear tight shoes. It's kind of annoying, but I'm like, oh, I just deal with it. And there's something like for me in other parts of life, like when there is something that's in my way and I'm hyper like picky about, to me there is, and I'm just saying for me, it's not for everybody, but like there is an avenue to like taking the attention and purposely putting it elsewhere and going, I just don't worry about it. It'll go away. Like the sensitivity to it will go away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about like mental rumination on a specific thing.
But I'm saying a lot of it seems to be coming, it can be coming, like sensitivities can come from like overly focusing on it. Like this thing's bothering me. It's rubbing me or something. And I now can't pay attention to anything else but that. And when I've been able to just take my focus elsewhere, and it's tough in the beginning, you kind of have to be like, yeah, that's fucking bothering me. That's bothering me. That's bothering me. But okay, let me get distracted and do something else. And then I've noticed like it goes away. The sensation of being hyper bothered by it like starts to dwindle. And so I just think there's two things going on. I think that's for people that are highly sensitive and have a lot more trauma or have a lot like a deeper autistic kind of expression, that's not as easy to do, you know, and I understand that. And I've seen that just through knowing people that are more that way or kids that are like hyper focused on those things. You can't just be like, just stop focusing on it, you know?
Yeah, no, I will probably end up talking about that on the parenting episode. This is the thing I'm trying to point to, because I've only in the last 5 years really started to honor what the sensitivities are telling me. I railroaded myself into things that made me uncomfortable my entire life. I wore clothes that made me uncomfortable. I put myself in environments that made me uncomfortable. I let there be more stimulation than I could handle, you know? And a lot of it was like, because I wasn't conscious. I can look back now and be like, oh, that was overstimulation in that situation. But what it would like end up resulting in is I would start a project and not finish the project. And I can look back now and go, oh, something about the environment in which I was trying to do that project was just not right for my system. The way that like you can't make music if I stick you in a sterile gray room, right? Like, so the environment I think matters for sensitive people. And
100%. And I'm not saying it doesn't.
All that PDA stuff we've been reading is really interesting because like even just a low level of this is not the way that I would do it will start to trigger a like anxiety, and that anxiety starts to it's also subconscious, but it starts to trigger like sensory stuff. So it's just I would never sit in a seat without a back. I would not have the thing and to learn something. So it's like it would be different if it was logic and I could edit that, but I don't know how to do it. And the place I'm expected to learn to do it is in an environment that isn't set up the way that I would set it up. And that's something I just learned. Like school was impossible for me because you're expecting me to learn things in an environment that doesn't work for me. So the more agency and control I have over my environment, the more I've been able to accomplish in these last, like specifically since getting divorced, you know, whatever, 8-9 years ago. And like for really the first time as an adult, having complete agency over how I do art, how I do work, how I move through the world, how I dress. I didn't have anyone else's expectations for anything. And for the first time in my life, I started to create art and work that was like flowing. And for me, it's because it was, you know, completely mine, you know? But no, I agree with that part. The tricky part of that, the mental thing, is like, don't imagine an elephant, don't think about an elephant. Don't think about an elephant, especially when you talk about kids. It's like,
yeah, and I think that's the challenge and the kind of the crux of some of the power of attention. Like, how much can you, when you say don't imagine an elephant, can you not? No, most of the time you can't. But the power of being able to not, what can that lead to?
Yeah.
And that, to me, is something I haven't perfected. But there's times where I realize if I get distracted enough and I'm like engaged in something, my attention's elsewhere. Like, I realize, oh, it's because my attention was obsessed with focusing on it, and that made it harder to operate in the world. When I allowed my mind to keep doing that, if I could wrangle my mind off of it, what kind of freedom would that give me?
Yeah.
Again, it's not it doesn't always work for everybody. And it's not something that's like, it needs to be judged. Like, if I can't do it, then I'm something's wrong with me. I guess sometimes in the world there is, like, we're living in the time where it's overstimulation, like a motherfucker. Like, there's information everywhere. There's drama everywhere. Everybody's got an opinion. Now, if you have an opinion, the wrong one, you get canceled. And then, there's 5G, and then there's busyness, and we can't make enough money, and how to operate and function in a world that's like that. It can be really difficult when we can't wrangle our attention where it needs to be. And I experience the same thing. Like, there are certain things I'm very sensitive to. If I'm going to be creative, I need it to be a certain way, and it's very hard for me to be creative when it's not that. But
when I first met Mark, I was described by my friends as living like someone who might have to, like, skip town at any moment. So I lived like a college boy, no matter my financial situation. A lot of this was informed by years of poverty. But even as I started to get to a place where I wasn't poor anymore, I never hung anything on the walls. Everything had to be like gray, or I got my very first headboard. My very first bed with a headboard when I was like 38. And it was cheap, and I took it with me to LA. That was just propped up against the wall. It was like ripped from the move. And, I lived in a small apartment with my kids, and my mom lived with me at the time. And just not good vibes at all. I had an Amazon desk in the bedroom where I worked. And then we spent some time.
Patio furniture for your...
I didn't have. The move was very expensive to get to LA, and my number one priority was that my kids have a place to do art. So I didn't have a living room really. My kids had our patio furniture in the living room. Anyway, it was a temporary situation for a couple of years, and then we hung out at a meetup at one point with a bunch of magic women, and Mark was continuously turning music on his phone and like lighting, incense and shit. Like, he was like dimming the lights. He was constantly trying to create some sort of vibe. And now, knowing you for a while, like, it's actually astonishing that you fell in love with me. And just figured, like, yeah, we'll figure this part out.
She just needs a vibe tech in her life.
And now I would... if you left tomorrow, I would live more like this. I get it. I see it now. But here's my thoughts about hypersensitivities, though. Because when I say that I spent my entire life, I was very mental until right before I met you. And so I was very mind over matter. I was probably pretty spiritually bypassy. I had mental tricks for everything. Like, the abundance course even is like a lot of mental tricks. I have since come to understand that there's also a body and an emotional body and the ether and all these other things. So I was very mind over matter, and I pushed myself to do things that felt uncomfortable my whole life. And I also am great at dissociating, which serves well for doing things that your body is screaming don't do. But the honoring of the sensitivities is relatively recent. So my whole life I had major gut issues. I had chronic headaches. I don't even want to think about how much Tylenol I've taken in my life. Like, a constant headache that I took Tylenol or ibuprofen for every 4 hours for years. A lot of like, I don't know, like health stuff, and I wouldn't even like acknowledge mental health stuff, but expressions of ADHD, which made it impossible to, you know, ever accomplish anything artistic, you know, any goals, and a lot of fawning and a lot of doing. I think when you're in a perpetual state of making yourself do things that are uncomfortable, you end up in a perpetual state also of being fake as hell. But there were certain of my sensitivities that were non-negotiable, one of which is like artificial fragrances, because I will like not be able to, like my headache will get so bad I won't be able to see. And so over time I did learn like I'm allergic to Tide and those fucking plug-ins and perfume. And so I learned to kind of avoid all of those things. This is way before it came out that those things are poison. We have learned recently that our shoes in this culture are way too small, and it like affects a lot of things, but it affects your mobility in later in life. So the part of you that knew that you should be able to bend your toes together in order to preserve your health into later age, you know, might have been what was fixating on that, even though it seems kind of dumb. I have a weird thing where I can't handle anything on the top of my head other than my own ponytail, or like too close to my throat. And I feel like that's a chakra thing. I feel like that is a sensitivity to, you know, maybe not everyone has this, but like, I feel like I'm not supposed to block those things. And because that's literally what it feels like I love chokers. I love the way that chokers look, but I feel like I'm being strangled. If there's something just sitting, if it's too wide, if it's thin, it's fine. But if it's too wide, and that is right up against that chakra. And I cannot handle hats or something like that on top of my head. I feel like there is a steam building that can't flow through. And I know you can wear hats or whatever. I think it's maybe different for different people. But since I started like getting curious and going, okay, are these sensitivities trying to tell me something about my energetic body's needs, you know? And there are other ones that are just like, you know, I think just peculiar things about me. I have something weird about clothes being too close to my armpit or skin touching other skin, but that's, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I do agree with you.
Yeah, it's just a combination. I think it is important to be curious about the sensitivities. Why is this overwhelmingly annoying to me all the time? Maybe there's a reason. Maybe I'm supposed to pay attention to it and adjust my life. And then there's it kind of brings up this like thing that I've always been back and forth between just all of the awakening process and figuring out what is what. And in a lot of spiritual talk, it's like, don't mentalize everything, you know.
Right.
The mind is your enemy. Get into your body, get into your emotions. And I've oscillated on and off of that. In the beginning, I was like, emotions are the enemy. I'm overreacting. I'm taking myself too seriously. And then I'm mentalizing everything. And that gets you a certain way. And then you realize like, oh, I'm bypassing a lot of sensitivities and feelings by just mentalizing it. And okay, put my attention elsewhere and just ignore the sensitivity. And then you thrive for a bit, but then it's like always going back and forth. So it's like, is reality mental or what is it, you know? And I think it's both. It's trying to figure out how to harmonize the two. You know, the emotional awareness and then mind and mental stuff. But I think primarily I take the mind as being, it's like your attention center. So it's like whatever is kind of driving your awareness is a mind thing, you know, and the power of that is kind of untapped, endless. I think we don't know like how much, if you can ignore certain things and hold your attention in a certain space, you can dilate time. You can, you know, remove your conscious awareness from being in the body, and you can kind of tune into the environment, to the fabric of reality, which is like fractal, and so there is so much power to it, but without paying attention to the sensitivities and the emotional stuff that is kind of anchoring you in a certain place, and being able to balance that out, then the mental stuff has no power to it. You're kind of limited, So I don't know. I oscillate back and forth between which is which and what's dominant. And I don't think there's a dominant one, but I do lean on a lot of times, like the reality does seem to be a lot powered by like awareness and mental. It seems to be mental,
Okay, wait, this is really interesting, the timing of this. Okay, so from a human design perspective, we were 5 centered beings, and all these different centers, and I might butcher this, but all these different centers, some of them are motors, meaning they drive you. And some of those are awareness centers, which would be like where you observe things and understand things and whatever, right? So we were splenic beings, which is essentially animals, right? For a long time. So that means we were driven by, or I don't know if that was a motor or an awareness center, so I don't want to butcher that. But like what ran the world was like instinct.
Yeah.
And so how, this cat is not conceptualizing its experience. It's running like a cat script. And it's in balance with nature. I guess some people think cats aren't, but like it's in balance with nature because everything in nature is doing that, right? And so then in 17 something, we became, according to human design, Homo sapien intransitus, I think it's called. And so we became ajna beings. And this is where we became hyperlogical. And obviously, just like the transition in the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix is years long, I would say that the transition and the mutation into that probably started at the beginning of Cross of Planning. So when we look back at pre-Cross of Planning, we project how logical we are onto that. But people that was like their spiritual experience or whatever was either very superstitious, or it was I was actually researching this the other day for a Patreon episode I'm about to do. We just can't understand what it was like to exist before the 1700s because we are actually wired different. So we're going to project this kind of scientific, super logical shit onto it when in reality they were operating from a completely different operating system. So what's happening right now is we're in that same transition because that version of humanity was only meant to serve as a mutation to solar plexus awareness. And the reason that now science is talking so much about how there's actually more neurons in the gut than there is in the whatever, and you're starting to hear this so much about the gut is actually controlling more than the mind, is because we are starting that mutation. And so the children born in a year and a half will be solar plexus beings, which means their awareness will not be mental. It will be the solar plexus. And the world, the planet, will only be supporting solar plexus awareness. It's not going to make sense to mental awareness. And the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is not going to be fun for people who are still trying to use mental awareness. However, that's what you and I were born and raised and conditioned into, right? And so I think what it was our entire lives and what it's becoming is very different. And I think that you and I, in our deconditioning and the life that we have built for ourselves, is largely that kind of solar plexus, like what feels right? What does my mood indicate, right? Where the hyperlogical reality is like, this is what you should do. This is what makes sense. This is what looks good on paper. This is, combined with how much consensus and tribal like conditioning we have about like or collective and tribal about what the consensus thinks we should be doing. So this makes so much sense. So the way that the aliens like framed things was that we were going to get new dimensions added to reality, not meaning places, but like aspects of reality, new frames of reference, like points of awareness. And they said that the seventh dimensional point of awareness was the body. And the sixth dimensional point of awareness was the creative spark. And this is where you could just create worlds. They said you would not be able to access the sixth. It actually came in first until after you had already, I would now say deconditioned, but they said like accessed the seventh. So until you figured out how your body actually works as a piece of technology, you would not be able to create realities using that. And I think that the body in this instance is talking about that solar plexus, gut awareness, right? So we have like a whole brain here that we don't know how to use.
Yeah. Well, and so to clarify, when I say mental, and this is what has been a hiccup for me forever, is like when someone says mental, I'm like, okay, and I think mind, I think brain. But when I'm saying this is like that the reality is mental, it's not that. It's not the logic mind. I'm saying like points of awareness, the most powerful point of awareness, which I think as more dimensions come online, the vehicle we're in offers more sensory inputs to be able to control the attention. So it's like the body is like literally a vehicle. Like I'm shopping for vehicles right now. So this is a perfect metaphor. Like I'm looking at a certain year of truck that I want, and I'm having to gauge how much mileage is on it, how much it's been used. So how much more mileage I can get out of it. And then certain years, I'm on the verge of years where like all of the digital stuff started coming online. So it's like, oh, this one's got heat seaters and heat seaters.
Heat seaters.
Seat heaters.
We got an episode
and
name.
Coolers, Bluetooth, and it's like a reverse camera. And so with that vehicle, I have more inputs and like sensory apparatuses to use the vehicle and have more awareness of the environment when I'm moving that vehicle through. The older ones don't have all of those accoutrements, but I'm using that vehicle and it's my awareness that's plugging in and getting into that car and then moving around and using it. And so our bodies are like that, and the mileage we have on them, is at a peak right now. It's like we only live to 80 or 90. We can only get so much mileage out of it. But if we can, go with nature and update the system, then our soul's awareness that jumps into the body has more ability to control its reality and drive its reality. And so that thing, the soul awareness, the one that's like paying attention, basically, is what I'm talking about as like it's all mental, not logical, not overthinking. It's like where is my awareness and how much control do I have over that? And what will that give me in reality? What does that help me avoid as pitfalls, as distractions? And what does it help me, how does it help me like manifest what I want in reality? And so I do think that that's, when more things come online, the solar plexus, and we have already had a reality where we like lived instinctually just through splenic. That doesn't mean that we no longer pay attention to the spleen. It's a part of the system.
No, I agree.
And so we are upgrading the vehicles. So we have, the Bluetooth ability and the rear camera in the car to be able to intuitively know and sense the environment. So controlling our awareness becomes, there's more sensory input to it. So you use the awareness in a different way, I guess, and that's kind of what I mean about it being mental. It's just, where is your awareness? And that's going to like dictate the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I would, what are your thoughts about, I feel like I reference human design a lot, which is fine because was supposed to be the point of this podcast. But the thing I like about human design is I feel like it gives me containers for like files for things I already experienced but didn't have a name for. And it gives kind of a standardization. And the things that I don't resonate with about human design, I just say I don't resonate with them. But a lot of these things I do resonate with. And something that has changed exponentially in my own consciousness journey over the course of the last, I don't know, I guess I would say like 5 to 7 years, 5 to 8 years, is how much surrender and just like kind of taking my hands off the steering wheel. I feel like that's the direction that I've been pointed in, where younger versions of my awakened self was real heavy on the how to create reality and stuff. I was always like, I don't know, pretty good at accepting and surrendering, but I definitely felt a lot more agency to push the experience. And that has really softened in me. And so in human design, they talk about passenger consciousness. In that metaphor, there's the car, which would be the body. And then there's the computer and the steering wheel and all these different aspects of the body, but that you as a passenger would just get in the car and that your awareness would serve the purpose of just going along for the ride. Do you resonate with that part?
100%.
Okay.
And that's what I think there's a paradox in this, like as I talk about it. And I was reminded, I was listening to Alan Watts the other day because I've just been in a last couple of days, this eclipse I was fine until the last 2 days, and I went into
eclipse season.
Good Lord, I went into just an abyss for 2 to 3 days, and was trying to ground, and was just like outside watering plants and just had my feet in the soil, doing everything I could. And then I was like, I haven't been in the place of listening to things, but I was like, Alan Watts came into my mind, and that he has always been just like this safe space to go listen and get grounded back into just the important, simple things. And it was a lecture about this kind of thing, about kind of passenger consciousness and how you get the power of the universe, or the Tao, as he would say, or the Godhead, is by letting go, but consciously doing it. And that's where all the power is not trying to force and grab, but to be aware in a certain way where, when you really, like, nature is just the greatest metaphor. Like, that is God. Like, the way it functions in such a radical way where, like, life and death are 2 parts of the same pole. It's always anything that dies gets fed to the life, and it's like this cycle. And it's functioning in such a powerful way because it's not attaching to anything. But you could argue, in a sense, like, individually, the cat and the bugs, they don't have the ability to do anything but be splenic, But there is a sense of power there that is like paradoxical, because when you do have the awareness to, like, know that you are aware, you want to manifest reality, so you want to push the reality. But in a sense, you don't. You let go enough with that awareness that, like, if I let go and tune in to the universal nature consciousness, like, I will have what I need in the moment if I can become aware of the subtlety of that. And so there is a, like, certain part of, to me, like, what becomes really powerful in reality is relinquishing control in a huge sense. But there's a paradox where, like, that kind of gives you the power of control. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah,
like,
100%.
And so that, to me, to be able to make that distinction and that decision is this awareness center that is not pushing or controlling. It's like radically accepting every single thing as part of the experience. And it pulls your consciousness further and further back into a place where you're like, oh, everything is just happening to me. Like, I don't have to control it. Like, everything is a different part of me, and I'm not doing anything. I'm happening. Like, it is just going.
Yeah.
And that if you can stay in that place, that's where everything, all the power is. But the second you identify with it, it goes away. The second you try to push it or you get excited about it, it goes away. So it's such an art to try to stay in that place. But I could then argue back to the beginning of our conversation that, like, if you stay in that place and you radically accept it as like, this is a purposeful thing and something that is happening to me right now is divine and wonderful, then the sock being twisted up is like, I'm supposed to be having that experience. And the less I resist it, the further I get to a place where it doesn't bother me and I just move by it.
Right. So awareness versus what, like, logic, right? So let me just confirm this real quick. So Ajna centers about conceptualization, how we make sense of information, process ideas, and form mental frameworks. It's where we build stories that make life coherent. People who have a defined ajna have a consistent way of narrating reality. These people often sound certain, even when they're just processing. Their narrative has a distinct flavor and lens. Open ajna takes narratives in from others, flexible, adaptive, able to see many perspectives, but can feel pressure to lock into a story that isn't theirs. I think most people have open ajnas. You and I both do. And I feel like like social media is such a great example of a bunch of open ajna people feeling like they have to have a fucking locked in narrative. So this kind of, I don't want to drift too far into this because I'm doing a whole Patreon episode on this, but so much of the reality we're coming out of with the cross-up planning is about like conceptualizing things, labeling things, putting them into boxes, seeking like absolute truth. And that just isn't the reality that we're going into. The reality that we're going into is the present moment. So it's not building a legacy. And I've already noticed just in my lifetime, people are less concerned with building a legacy. It's not even with building something that lasts, which, you know, the gross expressions of that are like, what's that called? Where they build things to break, planned obsolescence, like extreme expressions of greed. But we're going to be present moment people, very aware and living in a constant wave of, you know, I think the waves are different for different people, but like waves of melancholy into bliss, into, you know, whatever. And then it's just going to be different for many of us who are conditioned into a different life. But for the kids built, you know, the kids born for the new world, that will be their whole life, you know. And I don't know that we'll get into parenthood today because it feels like we're maybe taking a different track, but
it kind of blends into it.
It does blend into it a lot. What I see right now all over social media is people being like kids these days about school and blaming iPads or whatever, rather than questioning what was school designed for, and is that an obsolete thing, and why are tradition is also a big part of the cross-up planning that is going away. Another thing that I noticed that like traditions passed through my family have already fallen away. Like when I was young, like funerals were huge. Like everyone had a funeral. Now people die and it's like many of them don't have funerals, you know, unless you're looking at like people who are still like Christians and shit who are still very entrenched in tradition. But I just see so many of these things falling away. Anyway, land the plane, Jessa. When I'm talking about like the mental space and the way that I have been conditioned my entire life would be, let's say I had the thing about the socks. The mental space that I'm talking about has like a predetermined script that you need to get over the sock thing, you know, and, or this is what everyone else does, or you need to be normal or whatever. Like that's how I lived most of my life. And because of that, I never pointed awareness at why. There's no, you know, when I think of awareness, I think of curiosity. I think of observation. I think of like testing out different ideas of why this much must be. And when I'm talking about like mental space or like logic, I guess this would more fall into conditioning, but I'm talking about like, you know, this mind over matter idea, or this like the mind being this kind of masculine energy has this agenda that it wants to carry out. And it's not even stopping to be curious about, maybe there's a reason that the smell of Tide on the sheets makes the room spin. Now that I have honored all of my weird, quirky sensory stuff that drove people crazy my whole life, I don't have headaches at all anymore. But like, I had a headache all day, every day from the time I was about 15 until halfway through my 30s, you know? But the mind is like, well, you just have to try harder. You know, you're lazy. You just need to try harder. So I guess that's what I'm talking about with the mental stuff. Like,
yeah, and that's why I'm trying to delineate like where I'm talking about when I say mental, because it's not logic. Because I agree, all that logic, masculine kind of like, this is how it goes, is not helpful. It doesn't individualize. It doesn't put any emphasis on the diversity of different experiences, but it's that thing that is the experiencer, which is like, where's your attention?
Yeah, that feels very solar plexus. I mean, I think that's the...
Well, what I'm saying is it's all of it.
Yeah.
And the solar plexus coming online now is like a new tool that we're learning how to use, or the idea that there are neurons in your gut is like, you can't control your attention as much if your gut is out of whack. Like, you only have so much access.
Yeah.
And so learning how to get into the body and kind of harmonize everything, which would mean like paying attention to the extra sensitive things and understanding why they're there. Oh, I need to not have Tide in my life because it's messing me up. Taking action, and then you can have now more awareness. But then also it's like some of those things I've found myself, like if I've labeled like, we don't have Tide, we don't have any of these fake things, but every now and then we have somebody come visit that like brings some Tide and washes their clothes, and then the entire house is like, whoa, somebody's got Tide in this joint.
Yeah.
The ability to go, oh, I recognize that poison, and I'm not going to let it like ruin my day, or I'm not going to hyper fixate on it and be like, oh, that's why I have no inspiration today. It's because that damn Tide. And then the Tide becomes this like controlling villain in a place where it's like, really, I think the balanced place is to be able to go, oh, there's that poison again. And oh, it's here because somebody else uses it and they just don't know. It doesn't affect them. But I'm going to just take note of that and not let it like bother me, because I've already adjusted my life to not have that. And I'm aware and I'm sensitive to it. But it becomes a thing where you just traverse it because your awareness doesn't hyperfixate on it. And
yeah, I mean, I feel like you're talking about like victim consciousness.
It is kind of victim consciousness. It's a lot of things. And I just think it all points to me, it's a battle of this like awareness. How do you not, like when I got, triggered into that like darkness the other day, it was like, I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't get my awareness out of it. I could not. Now, am I supposed to? Probably not, because I'm supposed to learn something. I was being forced to tune into something else and accept it. And, eventually, as hard as it was, what released me of it is radical acceptance of something that I was so adamantly against and so caught up on, like, writing narrative after narrative after narrative of, like, why I'm a victim in it and I can't control it. And it felt like if I kept pushing that, it would eventually break. And at some point, I had to just go, okay, like that's just how it is. And I'm going to trust that it's something that I don't understand. And like there's a higher place for it to be happening. And if I just let go, that's where the power will be to have it turn out in a way that I can accept, I guess it's.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because I think that as we collectively become individually more sensitive, and all of our sensitivities are different, and that's a kind of a guiding thing for us as individuals, there is a lot of people out there also trapped in the shadow frequency of the 55th, which is victim consciousness, who are trying to make the world bend to their sensitivities. Yeah. And that's not going to work, because those sensitivities are meant to push us into like a higher, all of these things, all of the cross of Sleeping Phoenix is meant to push us into a higher like existence of self-sufficiency. And a lot of people are mentally conditioned that this is supposed to be an us problem when it's an I problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I completely agree with that. It's funny. We just had this experience, but when I tell you I have a super physical, like the room spins and I get a horrible headache and I get nauseous when it's like fake perfumey stuff. And it's been an issue since I got pregnant with Coco when I was 17 or 16. I don't know if that's a hormonal shift that happened or something, and it's really bad now because I protect myself from it. So similar to when I quit eating gluten, like I became almost more sensitive to gluten, but every time we go to an Airbnb, they wash everything in Tide, and I could go there and then write them an email and be like, can you please stop washing this in Tide? Or I can just bring my own laundry detergent. So a lot of times I'll have to wash the sheets. Oh, it also like gives me a rash and makes my skin, I mean, I'm allergic to something that's in there, and then we mostly just control our environment. And if I get put into an environment where I can't, I mean, because even if someone's wearing a sweatshirt washed in that shit, it's bothering me on some level. And, when the kids, the tweens get in my car, like Lily has to tell her friends now, like you can't, they spray so much body spray and then get in the car. If I'm even just driving them to the skating rink, I'm ready to vomit by the time I get there. So I hate being annoying like that, but I'm like, you guys have to spray that shit once you get out of the car, because it's like going to ruin my night. But if I'm out in public, or like, obviously I'm not going to say anything at an Airbnb. My dad and stepmom came and stayed here while we were planting the bamboo to help, and she did some laundry. I don't think she uses Tide, but she uses like some generic something similar. And, I just opened the windows and closed the laundry room door and just avoided that side of the house for 5 hours or whatever. I'm not going to make it her problem, but it's my responsibility to like honor my sensitivities. And if I'm in a situation where I have no agency, then, and there's nothing I can do, then that's when I just employ like radical acceptance. So I just feel like there's a flow chart for how to survive the cross of Sleeping Phoenix, and it just boils down to, can you control it? Yes, then, or can you change it? Yes, then change it. Can you change it? No, then accept it. Like, that's it. Because a lot of the shit, we're just here on a ride, and it's really kind of changing my perspective. And when we talk about going from being a masculine age to a feminine age, like you're going from driving energy to receptive energy. And part of receptivity is you're accepting what is, and if you feel motivated to change it, then by all means change it. But victim consciousness will have you thinking that denial of reality is like virtuous, where it's actually just draining your energy, So as the thing you were stuck in for not the last couple of days, but for a couple of days, like something that you really just did not want to happen. You're really against it happening. If you were the one that got to make the decision, it would not be happening, but you are not the one who gets to make the decision. And it like triggers all this like justice and whatever. And we're all going through so much of that, looking at what's happening in the world. And, especially people waking up out of the fantasy that the government gives a fuck about you. Is like, I don't want any of this to happen. And it's like, yeah, well, at least for this moment, you're not the one in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And so, or you're in the driver's seat, but it's a self-driving car. And so, I think ultimately this version of reality leads us back to our power, because masculine energy, the way we've experienced it at least, externalizes everything. And this is forcing us to realize that reality is a reflection of our internal experience. So the thing we are engaging with externally is actually internal. So it's like, once I accept the external thing, because I can't change it, you know, if you can change it, change it. But if you can't change it, like, then what inside it, like, what is this reflecting? What restriction or belief in injustice or like lack of freedom, or like, what is this reflecting back to me, you know? And then sometimes, and this is why I think it's dumb to just be like good vibes only, because I don't think you learn how reality works with this. But I had to get off social media, and I'm staying off social media until our wedding, because I watched a woman get stabbed, and then I watched a public execution, and then I watched someone get decapitated and their fucking head get kicked down on the same social media apps that I have to say grape or unalive. They just show you videos of people bleeding out in public. And after the beheading, and then it's just everyone wants to talk about whether or not that person deserved it. And I'm like, it's just a comment on all three of them. I'm like, okay, I don't think this is like, it changes my orientation to reality. And so suddenly everything and was previously very desensitized to violence. I was raised around violence. I experienced a lot of violence in my 20s. I've obviously was raised on extremely violent television and movies. And it's shocking to me how not desensitized to violence I have become through healing. So it all bothers me. I can feel the effects on my nervous system, but it had completely changed my reality. It was also eclipse season, and that was the wildest eclipse season I've experienced in a long time. Eclipse season already has that kind of surreal thing to it, but it started getting reflected back to me where someone told Lily they were going to blow up our house because she said she wasn't interested in, Lily's 12, by the way, said she wasn't interested in a relationship with him. And I'm like, okay, the violence is in the field, and I'm like, now the violence is starting to be reflected back in our life. So we're going to hop off here because I have fear motivation. So if y'all don't want me to turn this into a fucking fortress, that was such an ADHD stream of consciousness.
Well, and that's arguably the attention, like where your attention was on what was being given on, social media, which we have some agency in, but a lot of it's just algorithmic and whatever is like kind of being propagated into the collective to nudge us all a certain way, fucks with your attention, and then it bleeds into your reality, and you start having that reality. And so then the fix to that is like, we'll take the attention off of that social media thing, and it will, mitigate that effect.
Your reality is none other than an audio-visual demonstration of where your attention is. The universe assumes that your attention is on that which you desire and gladly provides you with more of the same. So if I just ended up in an algorithm of insane violence, then that external input turns into internal attention, which then gets projected back out into my reality. And so if I continue to stay in that, and when your algorithm's doing that, everything feels violent to me. The new neighbors feel like they're going to be violent. Everything feels violent to me. And as someone who has experienced a lot of violence, been on the receiving end of a lot of violence, it's not hard for my body to go sync up with that. That is then going to start showing up in my day-to-day reality. And the quickness with, I guess, fourth density, the quickness with which those reflections happen now is crazy.
Which also means the quickness with which you can remove your attention from it. You can come back to center.
100%.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, obviously, one of the most powerful weapons right now to nudge and corral people into a certain frequency that is more suitable for them to do what they want to do with, they or whatever. It's just this, which I think that's the public execution drama that has happened, like really pulled a lot of people into a specific corralling mode of thinking and frequency that I think is very useful to keep people in a certain frequency. And a lot of it is fear and fear and like urgency to make it stop and to say something or to go join a church or join a group or repent and do all these things, that are just, again, kind of removing our agency, our power, and convincing us that like reality is just happening to us and you can't do anything about it, because
yeah, when it's very obviously.
Yeah.
Some things are very obviously orchestrated, and I want to put my head to a wall when people take things at face value. But yeah,
I mean, my algorithm on social media.
Yeah, I think you managed to not see the heading, which I think was the one that really
I didn't
sent
see
me over
the
the
heading.
edge.
I'm glad I didn't see that. I mean, I saw the public execution, and that was dark, and it was kind of wild to see the world respond the way it did. But my algorithm, I'm pretty. Not on it a lot, and when I am, I'm pretty adamant about keeping it like artsy and inspiring, and I'll get down certain rabbit holes where I'm into like cameras and film stuff. So then I get a lot of like really creative filmmakers, and then there's like spiritual stuff, but it's mostly like just like poetry and like metaphor stuff, and so I can keep it pretty good vibes. But I will say, just whatever has happened in the last couple of weeks, it started to bleed in no matter what. Like there's still a good amount of victim consciousness going around, which is the thing that I think, you talk about a lot. And I was listening to a video the other day that you sent me, and it was a video that had like a bunch of quotes from other people and parts of lectures, and they were making their own kind of points combined with these other lectures. But one of them was really interesting because they were basically saying the thing to understand why the system, how it keeps you engaged, how it keeps people suffering, and how it keeps you out of your power is the two simple words: is victim consciousness. It's to keep you base level as a victim. And when you look at obviously like the major religions like Christianity, the base level is you were born as a sinner, baby. And everything that's happening to you and everything you have to do is you have to accept that ultimately, like, you're just not good. You're a sinner. And it keeps that as base level. So everything else kind of is always going to be running through that. And if they can keep you in that victim place, you're half mass, like you don't have your full power, and then they can do whatever. Everything that's happening in reality can occur. It can get as complex as you'd like it if you're staying in that victim place. And that is so subtle, the way it happens. I think it's become very subtle. A long time ago, it may have not been as easy to pull off what is being pulled off in reality, but they've set that thread a long time ago, this like basic victim mentality. And you just think of everything in culture right now, like taxes, being able to make money, being able to have a house, being able to like own enough land, being able to have a job, have the right love, not be a sinner, repent. It's all like, I am a victim.
Yeah.
And so easy to individually like fall into a specific point of awareness that is that,
Yeah, and it's not the things that happen to us. It's the way we engage with the things that happen to us. And so I think that it's tricky because people who are in victim consciousness will say, are you telling me it's my fault? And fault and blame in and of themselves are tenets of victim consciousness.
Right.
Those concepts are traps. Blame, fault, even the way that people engage with personal responsibility is like, if you haven't deconditioned the idea of blame and fault. So blame and fault are about narrative. It's about establishing
a victim.
And then victim has become like synonymous with virtue, which is also not accurate.
Right.
And so when we're talking about like taking personal responsibility, or even taking responsibility in relationship, how much someone is willing to take responsibility is directly related to how conscious they are. A conscious person who has deconstructed shame and, guilt in a healthy way is going to have a lot of spaciousness to take responsibility for harm they committed. They're also much less likely to actually be harmful. But trying to get like an emotionally immature person to take responsibility for harm they've committed is an exercise in futility. And it is also like often an expression of my own victim consciousness, because why did I put someone without the capacity to show up healthy in a position in my life to be able to commit harm? Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to like you're walking down the street and you get attacked by a stranger or whatever. But the vast majority of the way that we are engaging with politicians, celebrities, unhealthy prospective partners, unhealthy family members is we are projecting our own capacity for awareness or our own capacity for taking responsibility or our own, a lot of times, virtue that we think is virtue is actually people pleasing. And we're going, why aren't you giving me that? And so radical self-responsibility says, I, the adult me, is in charge of keeping the child me safe. And that means that every decision that the adult me makes, I am responsible for who I let in my life, how I let people treat me, like the environments I put myself in, the external events that I engage in, like where my attention is. Like these things are my responsibility because literally no one else is you can't count on anyone else to do those things for you. And that is only going to become more and more true. And so I get that this sounds like rugged individualism, and it's because it kind of is. I would say a lot of rugged individualism in capitalism is competition. And I'm not talking about competition. Like radical self-responsibility also requires like a personal code of ethics that does not cross into the aura of others, So me taking care of me cannot overtly be like taking from you. Now I might make decisions that are good for me that, you'll hurt your feelings on because you've attached to my decisions in a way, or, me doing what's best for me might mean I have to break up with you or end our business arrangement or whatever. But the core tenet of the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, and, I have this natally, so I feel very familiar with it, is the 55th gate or the 55th gene key. And if I could proselytize or evangelize any aspect of this, it would be getting very familiar with this construct, because the people who live in the shadow of the 55th, and I experience it a lot, and I've a lot of my life, and I have to work very hard to not be in this, is victim consciousness. It is this belief that, it's not fair and everything's happening to me and whatever. And the thing about victim consciousness is you cannot, like, you'll put your coffee cup on a nightmare button that will just reflect back nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. And so someone living in victim consciousness, and you see a lot of this on the internet. I guess I look at it a lot, so I would see it a lot in my algorithm. But you'll just end up in a feedback loop of a nightmare. And you could be sitting next to someone who has also had childhood trauma, who is also part of a marginalized group, who is also all these stories you tell yourself about why it's harder for you. Someone can have the exact same things, and they're having a completely different reality. That is the result of whether or not they are in victim consciousness or the freedom of, it's kind of like it's the story. It's the story you tell yourself. Yeah. But then that story is going to keep getting reflected back to you.
It's like it's a drug. It's a weird addictive drug. That's why it made so much sense when this woman was like, the crux of all of this, like the they have got you and everything is victim consciousness. It's because when you stake claim to it, in a subtle sense that you're kind of like, oh, I'm a victim, and then you take action, it creates more. But the feeling that you think that is going to occur is that you're going to get justice if you claim enough of a victim. And that's subtle. It doesn't have to be like verbally and like your actions are like that. But internally, when you are in that state, like that's what feels right. You know, in these last couple of days when this thing that happened, which is like a personal life thing, but it felt, and like I could kind of stay conscious that it was like, I need to just let go. But it was a thing where it was like, if I just am passive, then I haven't taken my responsibility in how I'm engaged in this. And so therefore I'm not doing due diligence. I'm not setting a boundary. I'm not standing up if I just like let it happen. So it felt like if I push hard enough then and kind of move towards like justice action and try to overly explain and rationalize things, then we'll solve this. But it was from it is a disempowered place, and it was like a lack of acceptance of what was happening. And so it's like this weird drug that's like an addiction where you're convinced if you feel that certain way, like if you're a victim, that you're going to get justice and you're going to balance out. But it actually just creates more chaos from like a victim standpoint. If you're telling the universe like, oh, poor me, and I don't want this to happen, it's just reflecting more of that. Oh, you like the stuff that you don't want to happen, so here's some more. And to get off of that is really difficult because it is a vicious loop, and it's activating a desire to fight and be in victim consciousness, not fight from a empowered like acceptance state, you know. And that subtle difference is so subtle. But funny enough for me, after I just like kind of realized I was looping and like stuck in a dead end, finally like adjusting and going like, no, this is okay that it's happening, and you're not sacrificing your, you know,
like integrity
and like authority in the position that I was in, gets you into a place where you can actually like soberly approach the situation from acceptance, but also like, oh, I'm just going to trust, and these are the actions I'm going to take from a more balanced place. And therefore you interact with the other people that are involved from a place that's more likely to find balance and acceptance. It's hard to talk around that without the details of
I know.
it,
I have like so many examples I want to use, but none of them are solely our story. So we have to keep it.
It's, I mean, it's kind of along the lines of doing a parenting episode. It's drama in parenting, you know?
Yeah.
Co-parenting and raising a kid, all of that stuff that can trigger deep savior or like empathy that can kind of fall into like, it can trigger victim stuff. It can trigger a rise of like justice and fight that actually isn't balanced acceptance. And it's a very hard thing to traverse. I think that's why a lot of people want us to do it like a parenting podcast, because it is a complicated thing to try to be awake, to try to be, even if you're not in like a co-parenting relationship, just raising kids with two different parents that are, you know, come at it from different directions. It's so hard. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, like sometimes I don't know. Do you want to do the whole parenting thing? Cause we've already, you want to open that can of worms? We're already about an hour in.
I mean, we could, and if we don't finish it, we just continue. You can make it a two-parter.
Okay.
Can I pee real quick?
Yeah.
Here's the thing I want to talk about with children. Why do they break everything?
Oh, dude, we don't even have males. You have no idea. You don't even know
chaos of a little
the
boy.
potential of breaking everything you own until you got.
It's crazy. It's just destroyers. Like this thing broke.
How did that break?
A kid knocked it over.
Oh.
And it wasn't even like on a hard thing, but they were like, weren't even doing anything crazy. They're just clumsy as hell.
Yeah.
Just like, gunk.
Well, specifically my offspring. Is that mine or yours?
No, it was my offspring.
Oh.
She was gaming and flailing, moving her body around and stuff. And then it wasn't like in a bad place too. It was like off the couch down, but then she kicked it and it was so hard. It was like, go! But whatever.
Onto the carpet and it broke like that?
Yeah.
Dang.
But it was loud. I mean,
that might have been the universe pointing to the Cobalt Ascension bottle you want to get.
oh yeah, the blue glass bottle.
All right. Well, people have requested that we talk about parenting. And so we're just going to talk about our philosophies with parenting and our experiences with parenting. But I do just want to say up front that this is a topic, and this might just be trauma from spending years in mommy groups on Facebook back in the day, but this is a topic that I think is just very personal for different people and different kids. And I feel like people can get defensive in hearing these thoughts and, whatever. So I just want to say, like, this is just our experience and our philosophies. Parenting obviously is not one size fits all. And, we're yet to see.
Yeah. And by no means are we convinced this is right.
Yeah.
I think that's what's really interesting about parenting in general. And you don't realize it until you start doing it and you have a kid, but that it's like a daily practice of, I think that was the best thing to do. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And, but I think that's what's important is kind of this perspective of it's like, I don't think any of us have it figured out. It's a combination of intuition and watching how other kids are raised, what seems to work, what maybe is a fix. And so it's like, it is very nuanced and individual, but I think, I just, as a caveat from a lot of the stuff that we were saying that might feel confident and sure, I think both of us are constantly in a place of like hoping we're doing the best and trying to find a real balance and kind of in this thing we're talking about of like not forcing, just letting things kind of happen too.
Yeah.
Trusting that it'll work out. I like that Gabor Mate, like, I love his philosophy on parenting and a lot of nervous system things, but he as smart as he is and as much as he's figured it out now, I think when he was raising his kids young, he hadn't figured out a lot of these things, but he makes his blanket statement with a lot of the advice he gives is that, a lot of people that come to him are like, I don't want to mess my kid up. And he goes, let go of that because you're going to. It's your job to do it. But there is a way where you can kind of mitigate some of these like wild traumas that I think our boomer parents were not aware of. Parents before that were definitely not aware of. And so you can do better, but we're kind of in a place where you're supposed to give them some issues to figure out themselves. And so right. I think that for me, that puts me in a place of like, I don't need to be perfect here, but I'm going to definitely, the stuff that I have become aware of in my life that were traumas from my parents, I'm going to not do those as well as I can. But we only know so much now that I think we're probably going to, give them some programs that they have to weasel their way out of at some point. And there's just like impossible to avoid that.
I've really already seen that. I mean, I'm of the belief that as a parent, karmically, your children, you're hosting them, and you've been with this soul many times. They've been your parent before. You've been siblings. You've been, I was going to say lovers, but feels like a weird thing to say about your kids. But I believe that we travel with a relatively small group of souls cut from the same cloth. And so that is, zoomed out how I kind of look at it. And I believe that as parents, our job is to create a maze for them that we're going to create on accident. You know, even the shittiest abusive parents are operating off of like their own trauma. They're not mentally going, I want to fuck this kid up, usually. But as a conscious parent, you can also help them create a map, you know, for finding their way out of it. And so,
yeah.
My parenting history, for people who are not familiar, I actually didn't want to like, I've been asked to talk about this since the soberish days, and my younger kids were still kind of young. And so I was like, I really have no idea if this is like all of my philosophies are going to blow up in my face, but I have been really enjoying watching Phoenix and Lily move into the teen years and kind of seeing the difference, like the difference in how they are as teenagers versus how I was as a teenager, and then kind of the difference between them and their friends. And so I'm feeling a little more confident in my parenting choices than previously. So my parenting history is I got pregnant with Coco when I was 16. I was dead asleep, extremely traumatized, and, you know, had a very rough childhood. It was okay at my dad's house, but it was, you know, experienced a lot of abuse and stuff at my mom's house. And then my dad, when I went to live there at 12, tried to go the route of like punishment, you know, is how you guide rather than, you know, what we would do these days. And so, yeah, I did, my parents really fucked up with me, and I was obsessed with emancipation, but I did not do well in school. And so I self-emancipated by getting pregnant at 16 and getting married. And I then became a Christian, or I was like already had gotten saved and backslid with the boy and then was a Christian. And so I had married a pastor's son, and we were very involved with the church. And the parenting philosophy that I then followed was that of James Dobson type, like spanking, cry it out. You know, our pastor used to say if he saw a kid crying in a store, he would go up to the parent and say, there's a cure for that. It's very kind of harsh. There was a lot about breaking a child's will. There was no understanding of like normal brain development in a toddler. When a toddler is throwing a fit, it's literally that their brain cannot process what's happening. Punishing it does not do anything other than start to embed shame and a disconnection from the parent. I was very poor and overstimulated and had gained a lot of weight in pregnancy. I had no support. For me, that can be different for other people, but for me, when I'm really overweight, it's I really function to exist in my body because I can't move right or whatever. And so I literally could not afford a nursing bra. And so I stopped breastfeeding Coco. I also just like immediately was touched out and was not raised by a nurturing woman. So I did not know how to physically nurture anyone. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not a very physical touch person. It's much better now than it used to be. And so I was not, my mom was still in meth. Like I did not have support in doing any of those things. So I quit breastfeeding, and then she was bottle fed. I couldn't, she always wanted to be touched. All three of my kids were, and I'll get into this, would be like considered high need. And she always wanted to be touched. And I, was constantly propping her bottle up or like trying to avoid holding her a lot. And she's 31 now. She's not in here for this recording because we're not doing video, but I see the consequences of all of those things. I see the consequences of cry it out. I see the consequences of spanking. I see the consequences of avoiding physical touch. You know, I simultaneously have guilt and grace for myself because it's what I was capable of at that time. I got addicted to drugs when she was 5, and she went to live with my ex-husband's family, his sister. he didn't take her for some reason. And then I got clean when she was 10. I reached back out, and it took me a few years to get her back because I was like, I had promised when I left on drugs that I would not come back and rip her out of that family. I had promised the family that. And so I was kind of trying to honor that. But things just naturally fell into place where I got her back when she was 14. And by then I was awake, but I was still pretty kind of matrixed in a lot of ways. Like I guess the thing I was trying to say earlier is like, I am very, like the autism is very loud now. It's very obvious through my entire life that this was the thing, right? But I spent most of my life trying to do an impression of a normal person. And so by the time I got her back, I was remarried to someone who also thought that discipline was the answer to problems, which is weird because he's also an anarchist. But I think, went against my own instincts, and there was more punishment than I actually resonate with. Not compared to other kids, but yeah. So when I was pregnant with Phoenix, I was really afraid that I am like incapable of attaching to a baby because I didn't attach to Coco the way that I saw other people attach. And so I read a book called The Baby Book by Dr. Sears. It's not the Sears that is controversial. It's his dad. It's a very thick book, and it talks about attachment parenting. And I literally bought this because I thought it was going to tell me how to attach. I didn't realize it was a parenting style. And the premise, the things that this book taught were sleep cycles in a child. So their sleep cycle is backwards from us. So they go into light sleep and then REM sleep. So I learned things like, if a baby falls asleep on you and then you try to put them down and they wake right up, it's because you didn't wait for them to go into REM sleep. It taught me how to tell that when they were in REM sleep. It also promoted co-sleeping, on-demand breastfeeding, baby wearing. And these were not things I was considering before this, but I guess they were things I didn't really even understand. The premise of this super resonated with me. And so this is how I parented Phoenix and Lily. Now, I can't promote co-sleeping because some people roll over on their kids. And so obviously I'm not telling anyone else what to do, but I co-slept with those two kids. With Phoenix, I was over the top cautious, but I'm just already a person who wakes up every time I roll over or anything moves. Like I am I wouldn't say light sleeper, but I'm very aware of my environment. And at that time I had a cat that would sleep on my pillow, and I would wake up and make sure that the cat was okay. So I was confident in my ability to do this. And Phoenix slept next to me until about 3.5. And when I was pregnant with Lily and had really bad morning sickness and couldn't handle being touched, Lily still sleeps with me. So Lily slept with me until we moved in together. And Phoenix, I stopped breastfeeding at 16 months. Lily, I stopped breastfeeding at 3.5. They both fed on demand. I baby weared with Lily, and they were both... this is also a thing from that book, high need children. So there are some children that are just naturally very independent, and there are other children that need to be connected to mom's body. It might say dad's body also, but like literally they lived in my body and then they come out. And I think this was in that book, but like for the first 4 months, some people call that the 4th trimester, where the baby still wants to feel like that connected to the body. That book also talked about benefits of breastfeeding that go beyond just food. And something that I learned with Coco was like, Coco wanted to eat a lot more than was on the schedule. And when you're formula feeding, you can't do that, or you're going to overfeed the child, right? And so I learned but Coco would never take a pacifier. None of my kids would ever take a pacifier. And so I learned about like on-demand nursing as a method of soothing, like a nervous system, right, thing. and feeling connected to the body that they came out of, that they think for the first few months they are still a part of. And so this brought so much of the disconnection between me and Coco into light. The book also talks about the different levels of crying and how babies will actually let you know that they need something by just rustling. And so in my co-sleeping experience, co-sleeping from birth, I never had to get up in the middle of the night. Ever. The only times I had to stay up at night is if a child was sick, or there was one phase where like one of them was getting like blowouts for a week or something. So I'd have to wake up and change their diaper to make sure they didn't poop everywhere or something. But because my body was so attuned to them, they would rustle a little bit, and then I just flopped the boob out and they would nurse back to sleep. We slept 12 hours a night from birth on the whole time. And as a result, I was more rested, versus when Coco was little, she would cry. By the time I got the bottle heated up and everything else, she would have escalated, which that book talks about the levels of crying. So by the time they've escalated that it took you 10 minutes to wake up and go get the bottle and everything else, they're in fight or flight, which now there's cortisol in their system, which now they can't go back to sleep. And so you're stuck sitting up, rocking them forever, right? So all these things just made so much fucking sense to me. And attachment parenting was just so much easier than trying to get my space, you know? And I just surrendered to the fact that like my body belongs to this baby for a year, and it's really, 4 to 6 months. And then you start to get more freedom. The difference in the bond, I'm very close to Coco, but the difference in the trust bond between those kids and the way that I parented Coco and the bond I had with my parents is crazy. I mean, it's night or day. And that's not to say everyone who does cry it out has a bad bond with their kid. But for me personally, there's an attunement between me and these kids that is just very interesting. Like it made it much easier to parent them versus this like disconnected thing I did with Coco. Now, obviously I was in a better place. I was older. I was financially extremely insecure with Phoenix. There was a lot of stress there around money, but I was in a healthier relationship and whatever. So I know these things play in, but for young children, my philosophy is like, you cannot be too available to meet their needs. And with Phoenix, I had to go back to work at about 6 months. And so having that co-sleeping was also, I feel like, helped, catch us up on a lot of the bonding. Because I do think having to go to work when you have babies is crazy. It does not feel natural to me at all. And it's, I know very few moms who want that. It's almost always because we live in a capitalist hellscape. Co-sleeping and continuing to breastfeed, like, really, kept that bond between us when I was working a lot. I'll leave that there, but I feel like we should just start at the baby phase. So I am, no one ever takes this advice, or a lot of women don't take this advice, but like when someone's going into motherhood, it's like, you're going to lose yourself for a while. I go back to sleep. It's very hard for me to stay woo. I think that's normal. And if you can just surrender the way that like a mama cat or a mama dog just surrenders to this baby just needing your body to regulate for at least 4 months, you'll be happier. It will be easier. There will be a part of you, especially if you're younger, that is like screaming that you need to get yourself back. But this goes by so fast. And, I just think it was cheesy when the way that older people talk about little kids.
But then your kids get older and you reach the age where you like can't have little kids again. And you're like, damn. That can make you emotional. Anyway, especially when you're younger and you have babies, and especially your first baby, it feels like this is what it's going to be forever. But, you know, the first few years is very intense and it takes up a lot of your time and your space, but that flies by. And so, yeah, and it's hard. But my parenting advice to, you know, moms of babies is just to slow down and surrender to it and enjoy it, because it's gone really fast. Okay, you talk so I can cry. This is stupid.
No, it's not stupid. It's real, you know. It is one of those things that I think it is. It always seems cheesy when people say it, to soak it up, and it's going to be gone, you know, before you know it. And then when it happens, it's like, yeah, it's so beautiful, but it also is difficult. And so it's hard to stay present the whole time. And sure enough, once it's gone, and there's like nothing you can do to get it back again.
Yeah.
I mean, even for me, you know, I think it's a very different experience for a man and a woman, obviously, like connected to it in such a different way. But you know, raising my little girl was definitely like had a lot of complications as far as I was going through a divorce at the same time. So I wasn't able to, you know, even have an option to kind of like be present with a lot of things. I mean, I was present, but I mean, like, I didn't get to be around her when she was tiny as much as I would have liked to. And the quickness with being in that situation, with how fast the baby and toddler thing went, was really hard to adjust to and like accept. It felt like it really was just like a blink, like, and she was older, you know. And I look back at photos and videos now when she was a baby, and a lot of them, like when I didn't have her, and I'm like, damn, I didn't even get to like be there for that, you know. And it's really hard. There's something about it. There's just the baby thing. It's like, it was really difficult for me at certain times. I've realized, because I probably didn't. I
mean, you were there for her first, for most of her like infant
state. Yeah, for sure. But the innocence around like a baby and stuff is just so profound to me, and it's so delicate. But there's also, when you have like real adult problems going on, it's like so hard to just feel like you're doing a good job. But the thing that always is just this like pure innocence. And I think a lot of times we project an awareness onto kids or babies that like really isn't there. It's just this like open sensory thing that I think does take a lot of awareness to like just connect and stay as a safe place for that like very innocent, delicate thing. I think that's why it is so nostalgic to look back. You're like, oh, that was such a special thing, because there's no connection like that. Like with adults, nothing is as pure. But then it's like if you feel like you've done something wrong, it feels even more overwhelming, because it was so sensitive and so innocent, you know? And, yeah, so, I mean, for me, it was, I only have one kid, and it was, I don't know, one of these things, it's, for me, there was a lot of just intuition that I was kind of riding on, and a lot of it, I read some books and things, but there were certain things that happened with me, like the cry it out stuff happened for a little bit, and certain ideas of culture that didn't feel right to me. I didn't know why, but I was very much going into being a dad. I didn't really want to be a dad my whole life, but then it happened, and I was very on board. But I wanted to do it intuitively, because that's how I've run most of my life, and it's been great. And that was really hard when you're with someone that's not totally like that. And so there were many things that we did that I would have liked to do better. But
or different.
Yes, different. But the thing that, did become actually kind of a saving grace, it was really difficult in the beginning, like having the divorce and not being able to spend as much time as I would have liked to. The toxicity of that relationship was the thing that I knew that was not going to be good in the long run. And as we were able to go through that and balance out and get our separate spaces to raise her, it's been much nicer now to do a lot of the things how I would have liked to in my own house with her without the toxic relationship. And so that's kind of where I look back about like some of that stuff with guilt and grief that I didn't do it the way I wanted to. Now I can, with some limitation, as co-parenting is very complicated, but it's been much, I feel like I can deal with that guilt now because I have the freedom to raise her how I want to moving forward, and still have to battle, me and my co-parent have different rules and different ways we're going about it. But this is what kind of where we get back to where you said in the beginning, it's like I think there is this karmic thing when we choose to have a kid that they kind of choose us as parents. And I feel like a lot of what I'm always leaning on as far as being okay with somebody else, a co-parent doing something differently, is that she chose both of us
right
for a reason, and that they are very different. So the kid could get a little bit of both and be able to then kind of choose what works. And so I've kind of embraced the differences as a purpose that my kid has chosen to kind of be kind of in the matrix and then kind of not, and have two different households that operate very differently for her to get a very diverse taste of reality and how things can be. And that's really beautiful to me. And I really,
matrix here you're defining as like the system.
Yeah, because obviously there's one parent, and this is a lot of people deal with this. A lot of people get divorced because of this, because there's one parent that is very trusting of the system and all the things that come with that. And then there's somebody that wants to, find out a new way or intuitively do it or go with alternative things. And those two things can be very complicated because we're talking about a kid that we care about. And so one says the system's going to hurt the kid. The other says that woo-woo stuff's going to hurt the kid. And so it's very difficult to find a balance space. But
that's my number one piece of advice for people having kids. Being in love with someone is not a good reason to have a kid, because it's 2025. It's across the sleeping phoenix. You're most likely not going to stay together with someone. You're more likely to get divorced in the future than not, especially once the difficulty of becoming parents hits, because it's going to shift your relationship. And if there's already cracks in the foundation, it's going to absolutely rock it. It's very hard to have a long-term relationship now. And for younger generations, it's going to be even more difficult because it has to be based on authenticity and intimacy. There's not just this blanket commitment that the older generations had. And so being in love with someone is a terrible reason to have a child. You're better off having a child with someone who's your friend that you're aligned with. And so my advice to my kids and anyone else, anyone young, is find out what the major foundations of parenting are and pick someone you're aligned with. So that's, how do you feel about school versus homeschool? How do you feel about medical stuff? How do you feel about parenting styles? Find out what cry it out is versus attachment parenting, and what do you believe? Because if you believe that a child needs to learn to cry it out, which is how some people believe, then you're going to be really annoyed with someone who believes that you shouldn't let a child's cry escalate if it's within your power to help. And if you're a parent who believes in attachment parenting, you're going to feel like someone's ripping your heart out if they're a cry it out parent. How do you guys feel about food? How do you feel about diet? How do you feel about if you decide you want to live in different states? Like, what do you see as a parenting arrangement moving on. You know, what if your child comes out as queer? Like, what if your child has autism? Like, all of these things that are a very real part of parenting in 2025. The amount of people that have children, I did have kids with people I was pretty aligned with, and so I haven't had a lot of these struggles, but the amount of people who have children with people they are actually fundamentally like not aligned with, just on hopes and prayers that like, you know, we'll just stay together because we love each other, is crazy. It's like having a child is something completely different than having a relationship. And I think that that's something we're really going to have to separate. You're much better off, you know, single parenting by choice in a house full of other single parents and raising the child in a village, or having a child, you know, with a friend that you're very aligned with, than the way that people bring kids into romantic relationships as if those are the same thing.
Yeah, and that's what was very clear to me, like once I got through it and it was already done, that I was like, this is so toxic, like this isn't going to be good for the kid. And my best route was, and a huge reason I really pulled the trigger on separating, was for the betterment of the kid. And it was scary because I knew like I wasn't going to see her for a little bit and there was going to be difficulty. But I mean, to this day, it's still so, like, the importance of clarifying all those things up front is, I'm such an advocate for it, because like it's so difficult now, and it's good, like I said, because we're separate. It's better than if I stayed, but it's going to be like this for the rest of my life, you know, like she's always going to be her mom and I'm going to be her dad. And there's a difference in the way that we approach things. Now, can we both grow and be more malleable? Yeah. But I think the thing to me is, like, in the beginning, you know, I think a lot of people don't want to talk about all of those things and bring up like, hey, the difficult questions, like what if we separate, because it can soberly like show the differences, and then the fear is, well, then I have to break up with this person and I can't have the baby. But that's all an illusion, because really, like, if you have the baby with someone that's not aligned, like, everything's difficult, and the sorrow and the guilt and the lack of control that comes with that is so much pain, and it's so much more difficult to like feel good about parenting, because there's so much that's like out of your control that you know are very opposed to like those other ways. And so I
guess it's also like, until you've had a kid, you don't even know about parenting styles.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I didn't really know about, and like I felt like I talked about a decent amount of things before we had the baby, but then once you have the baby, it kind of all changes, and there's a different pressure about making the right decision, and people get very, you know, hard-headed about certain things, including me. But yeah, I think it's one of the most important things. Like, if you're deciding to have a kid, is like go through all of those things.
Yeah, I think I didn't mean to make, this is maybe a bad time to do this podcast. I'm giving like general advice and you're like, yes. You know, I think that parenting splits are another thing. It's just people get prenuptial agreements about their dumb money and their houses and their assets, but they don't do anything like this. They don't look at the things this way for parenting, which is, you know, really fun. And then people split, and it's like, you know, they don't align on who gets the kid how much, or what state we're going to live in, or do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just kind of based on this fantasy that we're going to stay together forever. And you don't realize until you have a kid that having children, if you're already in a rocky relationship, if there were already cracks, dude, those cracks are going to turn into caverns.
Yeah. Well, and it's weird that there is this fantasy that if we have a kid, maybe we'll fall more in love. Yeah. Maybe some of these cracks will be fixed. And maybe in rare cases that occurs. But I mean, it very much, I wouldn't say that was like in my situation, like why we had a kid, but it was tied in there because it wasn't completely planned, but it was something that, like, when it came up, it was rocky already, you know? And so there was a lot of conversation about like, well, should we do this? Because we're rocky. Is this going to work, you know? And there was a part of us that was like, well, let's just trust, and maybe this will, you know, pull us together more. And I would say it did for a month or two, because it's hard to not fall into this abyss of like this baby comes out and there's so much love and appreciation, and it kind of gets reflected onto each other. But then then the cracks started coming out, and it's so difficult. But you know, all in all, like I said, I think there's like in a more macro sense, some of us choose to come into like a specific situation that is going to be rocky because we're either karmically playing something out, or in a macro sense, sometimes when you have a difficult upbringing, it gives you a lot of leverage to change and become somebody, you know, magnificent. And so there's this like real macro place where you can look at, you know, even your life and the difficulties that you had.
Oh, I wouldn't change my childhood or my parents for anything. It's
and
what made me.
And so it's like they didn't consciously try to, you know, traumatize you, but they did, and that became a gift later on in your life. And so I'm looking at that a lot when I have these difficulties with co-parenting, where I'm kind of just like, she chose this, and I'm still going to try to stay as conscious as I can and do my part. And I think a huge part of doing my part was separating from that person to help her a bit more, help my kid a bit more. And it's really messy, and it's like there were mess ups all over the place on both parts, but it's all part of the like gift that she has, and being in having two very different parents, you know?
Yeah. On that topic, on the topic of relationships after having kids, my advice to young parents is do not fall into, I don't think this is your situation necessarily, but like, do not fall into scorekeeping. Do not fall into like, that caused so much destruction in my first marriage. How many diapers, who changed what, how many bottles, who made what, who gets up, like blah, blah, blah. When you're having that like craving to get your independence back, or the you know, the disorientation of, you know, your entire life changing, especially with the first kid, it can very quickly and very easily get projected onto your partner, and which can then translate to, and this could be either partner, but translate to nitpicking and scorekeeping and whatever. And these are things that are very destructive to relationships. Scorekeeping is very destructive to relationships. And the kid kind of can become an extension of other relationship issues, you know, and you can like, over what ends up becoming a pretty short period of time, you can go from, I mean, like I've known people who have gone from super happy partners, you know, into kind of enemies through the baby and the toddler years, you know. And different people adjust to parenthood different. So I know women who have felt like, mothers who have felt like, oh, I don't know if this is for me, and it took them a while to get used to it. I know lots of men who like feel kind of useless in the first year, but then end up really, you know, thriving as the child gets older. Like it's different for different people, and there's so much projection there, you know. And I'm not into the idea of staying together for the kids. My parents,
not at all. I think that's like a weird, I just saw it as a very clear thing that it was if we stayed together just for what? For the external version of like, we're strong parents. Like for the kid, it was not going to be good. I don't care what anybody else's ideas on it were. It was for the betterment of the child that we were separate. And the thing is, I mean, lucky for me, like my kid was young enough, like she doesn't know any different. You know, she sees pictures and it's like, oh, that's when you and mom were together. But like, she has no clue. There's no trauma there. I mean, I would say there's probably energetic stuff that happened early on when she was a baby and we were arguing in the room, which we both tried not to do, but it happened. But separating was the best thing that I could have done. There is not a lot of conscious awareness that she has of any kind of turmoil.
Yeah, my
That
parents
would have
split
been
when
there
I
for
was
sure.
2, and I don't remember them together, and so I have like no divorce trauma. They did decide to live 3,000 miles away from each other, so there were some complications there. But my mom and stepdad, which toxic relationship doesn't mean that one person's bad. It's just some people are bad for each other.
Yeah.
And so my mom and stepdad were great, I guess, kind of until my sister was born. They were really happy for a few years. And then my sister was born. She had severe colic and whatever. Like my stepdad was an alcoholic. My mom was a drug addict. So there's all of that in all of my history. But they were so toxic by the time I was 12. Like the fighting that happens when you let a relationship get that bad. And they were staying together for my sister. Like she felt like, I don't know what she felt because she wasn't like very conscious about trauma, but she just thought they needed to stay together until Jenny was 18. And the fighting that I watched happen between them, I literally thought that's what relationships were. And it has taken me decades to learn that like relationships are not supposed to have this intense fighting. But in my first marriage, you know, I would freak out about nothing and then scream and push him and stuff because like that's the shit that I was watching at home. I literally thought that's what a relationship was.
And that's what's so crazy is like the kids primarily are learning through observation of you.
Yep.
And then if they become aware that you're staying together for the kid, then you've actually put a lot of pressure on the kid. If they start to realize like, well, they don't get along and they're doing this for me, you know, they start to feel like they're carrying the weight of the relationship. I need to act straight because if I do something and piss off one of them and then they start arguing, that's my fault. You know, I think there's so many like psychological complications that can come from sticking together for the kid. I don't, you know, it does not seem to make sense in 2025, but
I think I'm inventing co-parenting prenuptial agreements now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because I think that people define that different. I think vague conversations like, what if we break up one day? We'll both be responsible. It's like you're both defining that different, right?
Yeah, and you're not traversing the actual fact of it happening and the emotional heaviness that comes with that can change your perspective. It kind of morphs you into a monster because you're fighting something else, and then you change the things that you said because you're emotionally dysregulated. And so you're like, oh, I did say that, but I didn't know you were going to do this and this. Now I'm going to get you back by holding the kid from you or whatever happens, you know, and that's, I mean, that's an unknown territory that can happen differently to everybody. I kind of wanted to actually get to now that we got through all the baby stuff and like, what's been a challenge for me and what's interesting, and I think maybe a lot of people are curious about, is like how, if you're relatively conscious and awake and you realize reality is the way it is and there's this system and the majority, you know, when you have a kid, like the majority of other kids that they're going to interact with, there's going to be a mix of parents that are like on the same page, very open and conscious. Then there's going to be a bunch that are like the opposite and very trusting in the system and matrixy. And how do you, as a kid, starts to become more of an adult and become their kind of like own autonomous being, like how to guide that in the proper way? And I'm thinking of things like where, you know, there's the aspect of health and food. We have become very aware of all the toxic stuff in food. And so we want to protect the kids from that, but you don't want to go too extreme where you're like complete abstinence of it because they're around kids that have no limitations on that. And of course there's this paradox when you like, you know, completely withhold something from a kid, like they want to go get it. And so how to traverse this like open-handed thing and letting kids experience something without like holding it back from them, but having an awareness that this is like potentially a unhealthy habit or a program. And for me, it's been like, I definitely feel like I am more built, and it's probably my own upbringing with my parents, but like I'm much more drawn to raising a kid as they're into adolescence and they can reason and understand, and you can talk to them with bigger words and like really get into like understanding themselves and reality and experiences. In these younger ages, I'm always trying to do that. And I'm like, just kids that don't understand one thing I just said. You know?
Yeah.
But the part of me that's like wanting to get there quickly is so they can understand, like, this is why I'm saying don't eat that, or, you know, whatever thing that I'm rattling off. And I think that's a real big challenge of like how to, because I think as we wake up, we want to raise awake kids, right? You want to raise kids that are conscious and have the ability to become aware early in life. Because as we all like have woken up later in life, we're like, I wish this happened when I was a kid, you know?
Right.
I did all these things that I didn't believe in, and I wasted so much time. But again, back to this thing where it's like, we're just guiding these kids. It's not our decision to make sure they're balls out awake in the beginning. Maybe they didn't want to be that way, because there's a euphoria that comes from being in the matrix and then waking up out of it.
Well, I think a lot of us have the experience of going, I think I was awake when I was a kid and I got put back to sleep by the system.
Yeah.
And all the people in the system. And so a lot of this is just kind of letting that awareness, like preserving that awareness for them and not conditioning them into whatever your deal is. You know, don't indoctrinate them into a reality, let them define their own reality. And then in that case, they shouldn't fall back asleep.
Right. And I think that's the approach that like we've taken is like the, what do you call our parenting style? It's
low demand.
Low demand. It is very much like letting them explore experiences and decisions and the positive and negative effects that come from that within a relatively like protected environment that I think is really useful and helpful. But it is nuanced, and sometimes there's like, maybe we are more strict than we should be on certain things. It's mostly with like food and unhealthy habits and stuff. But then I think that we always get to a point where we kind of roll back a little bit and go, well, no, they should just experience that, how that makes them feel, and will help guide them as they, you know, go through those difficulties.
Yeah. So I guess leaving the infant age and going into toddler age, my philosophies, we share almost all the exact same parenting philosophies. So, you know, for me, how I got through the toddler ages was like understanding brain development, because I think emotionally underdeveloped adults take offense to toddler stuff, where it's literally the limitations of their brain development.
Yeah.
And it is hard on a bad day not to feel like this child is fucking with me. And, you know, it is hard to get on the phone or do anything for yourself. If you are dysregulated, it's like they zero in on that. They're going to have more meltdowns. I now understand it's because they are synced up to our nervous system and our energy fields. And so when you're having a bad day, they're going to have a lot of quote unquote tantrums. I think it is, I'm like obviously very anti-spanking, but it is actually incredibly morbid to me to think that like for generations, children were getting hit in this culture for having absolute like standard.
Yeah, doing nothing wrong. Just being a kid.
Now, all that said, Phoenix, I used to describe Phoenix's cry as if it was designed to fuck me up. This is before I realized I was autistic. Phoenix was pretty obviously autistic. But I didn't learn anything about that. I should have had support. I should have like understood more about it. I was still kind of in survival mode. And so I was like one of these people that was like, I don't want a label that's going to limit them or whatever, even though I was very obvious this child was autistic. So when Phoenix would have autistic meltdowns in the toddler years, I would sometimes have to just like put Phoenix in the room and shut the door, because I could not regulate in that. And if Phoenix, we had a transition or a change of plans, Phoenix had the kind of autism that like things need to stay the way that they were planned, or you need to not, I learned not to tell Phoenix what we were going to do. Those meltdowns could last for 5 hours. I was not far enough in my own personal healing journey to be supportive to that. So unfortunately, this is one of those things where I have to just trust that the children came into my life when they needed the level of awareness that I had. Like, obviously the youngest has gotten the absolute best of me because I'm older and more awake.
Yeah.
But I, in low demand parenting or free range parenting is probably the closest parenting styles. We both intuitively parent. And so this is just, after looking into it, what you would call it. My children have always chosen their bedtimes, and
it's very autonomy driven.
It's extremely autonomy driven.
Even sometimes I would think some people would maybe say that's like too autonomous for a young kid, but it's not that to me. I think I was saying this the other day, there's something about, and I guess it's like, if I look back at my childhood and my life, as much as I can remember of it, a lot of things I figured out and learned just by like experiencing and watching things. And so there was a natural, it might be because I'm splenic too, but there was like a natural thing that, like, I think because my parents were engaged in other elements of life, I was on my own a lot, but I like naturally figured things out. And sometimes it is like, touching a fire and being like, oh shit, that burns.
Right.
So it's like some scary things, but there's a part of me that's why I intuitively, I'm always like creating a safe environment for the kid to explore things. And that's a huge part of nature. Like, if you let the kid figure things out and like make decisions for themselves, again, within a protected kind of environment, there's so much growth that comes from that, and self-empowerment and like autonomy and awareness that naturally comes online. And I think that's in contrast to like what we're calling helicopter parenting now, where it's like trying to be in front of every disaster or everything that might create a trauma or a bad habit, is to try to like dictate and get in front of everything. And
Right.
I think that obviously has created some very incapable kids as they become older, where they don't know how to think for themselves. They're afraid of everything because they were never allowed to just explore the reality. And that's what's always felt very natural to me. However, I would say the extreme of that can be like avoidance of certain things when,
Or like permissive parenting, where you're just actually afraid of the kid.
yeah. And, that's something that like, I think all parents can be honest with themselves at a certain point. It's like, I just don't want to do this right now. Can I have a day off, And so there's like sometimes there's, just to be honest with like, okay, I'm wanting to have a little bit of my own time, and I'm kind of avoiding taking responsibility right now and engaging a bit more. But with that in balance and being conscious of that, this kind of set it and forget it. It's nature. It's like one of the most, like, kids, when they are this, like, they're still very connected to this nature part of awareness, and they're curious and they want to explore. The more we let them do that, they find their groove, again, within an environment that's safe, they're allowed to really like build this autonomous structure and self-awareness that I find to be like so valuable. I got that maybe on accident.
Yeah, I feel like we got a lot of autonomy because our parents were kind of like neglectful, not maliciously neglectful. I mean, it was maliciously neglectful. A lot of my parenting philosophies with Phoenix and Lily were based on things I learned in hypnosis school, or class or whatever. For the first 7 years, the subconscious and the conscious mind are connected. Like it's wide open. And so whatever the child learns in the first 7 years, and a lot of what they learn is through observing, goes into the subconscious mind, which is programs, right? And then around 7, they start to develop something called a critical factor, where now there's a filter between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. This is why they stop believing in Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy and stuff after that age. And so after that age, you have to work hard to get something into the subconscious. As an adult, if you want to quit smoking, you have to get, 3 weeks of the same repeated habit. And it's hard to do because the conscious mind can't hold on to ideas. So that's why you'll have a whole plan for a new exercise regimen, but then you can't solidify it because the subconscious mind is already programmed in a different way. So for me in parenting, we share the same belief, but I think about it consciously more. I am raising adults. And so I think because they're going to spend most of their life as adults, they're only children for a short period of time. And the I think it's called authoritative parenting, but the way that the boomers, and especially the generation before the boomers, raise children is like children are kind of a second-class citizen, and that they need this completely different set of rules. And it's assuming that children understand that they are children, but they don't on a subconscious level. And so those things that you put into the subconscious under the age of 7 become their adult like baseline. And so when you expect compliance, when you expect like when you're like, a lot of boomers were obsessed with their authority. My mom was fucking obsessed with her authority. And so she put so much emphasis in respecting her authority that I became a raging people pleaser because I'm not built to respect authority. It's not my nature. I'm very PDA. I'm very autonomous. But what I really woke up to in this eclipse season is because she was emotionally unstable and obsessed with that sort of thing, I have this subconscious thing going where I am constantly managing unstable people. I'm managing their experience to stop them from freaking out on me. And I have finally now at almost 50 years old healed to a place where I can just say, hey, this isn't my shit to someone who's emotionally unstable and let them be unstable. I'm not coddling it anymore. But I was conditioned to do that at an early age. And so 2 of the first things that you learn to program out of people in hypnosis is that they do not need to clean their plate. So I don't think parents do this as much now. But I definitely had this program that I would not be allowed to leave the dinner table until I cleared my plate. And my parents thought that this was, I don't know, helping me appreciate food or something, getting nutrients in me. But then flash forward 15 years later, Applebee's puts, 20 times the amount of food your body can hold. And I cannot stop eating. I mean, you can see this now. I cannot stop eating what's on the plate. That is not a beneficial program that you put into a child under 7. The beneficial program would be honoring when they say they're full. Now, as a parent, it's fucking annoying because they're going to tell you they're full, and then 5 minutes later, they're going to ask for a snack. But honoring their relationship to satiation is important. The other thing that is programmed that is fucked up for adults is their relationship to sleep. A lot of adults have a really gnarly relationship with sleep. I am opposed to bedtimes. I am opposed to me telling you when it's time to go to bed. Now, I'm not opposed to I need some fucking space because I've been momming all day. And so my kids have never had a bedtime. They have always gotten to decide when they go to bed. They slept 12 hours a night. They took naps when they felt like taking naps. When they were tiny, I would nurse them down and then kind of wiggle out. Phoenix refused to ever go into the crib. And so Phoenix lived in my bed or, would crash on the couch. As they were toddlers, you would just kind of find them asleep somewhere. They would just kind of play themselves to sleep. I've seen no negative consequences of this whatsoever. I hear a lot of people say, well, if I let my kids stay up late, they then still get up early. That's only true for like 3 days because you'll see their schedule adjust. I do not believe telling a child, especially if there's power struggles or whatever, it's like, what is the long-term adult consequences of equating bedtime with a power struggle?
Yeah.
And this is where you have adults who get that revenge sleep procrastination thing, which is also kind of a reflection of a capitalist hellscape. But
adults who need to go to sleep but like can't. I still deal with this, and I don't have an oppressive work schedule, but I will know it's time for me to go to bed and we'll be kind of fighting it. And my mom would I had bedtime and it was way too early for me, and I would just lay in bed and ruminate for hours. So my kids have never had bedtimes. That is something they've always gotten to decide for themselves. And, if they end up having to get up early in the morning and suffer the consequences of being tired, so be it. We haven't dealt with a lot of, and the teenager is a straight up insomniac as a teenager, but so was I as a teenager. I barely slept.
And again, but when he does that, there are times where it's like, then he has to get up early and he'll be like kind of tired all day. But the cycles, again, because like nature will work itself out. Like they then will spend the whole day like sleeping and catching back up and getting back on a normal schedule, or school will do it. And so it always it always balances itself out. I feel like a lot of people are afraid that like if they don't get enough sleep, they're going to die or they're going to get really sick. And I mean, I guess that can happen. You can get sick, but when I've watched, and we are the same way with my kid. When she comes here, she's different when she goes home, but it always balances itself out when you allow them to, if they want to stay up late, they're going to get that sleep at some point. They're going to nap the next day, they're going to sleep in or whatever, or they're going to go to bed early the next night.
And so we do talk about consequences. And so I don't believe in punishment, and I don't believe in, as a parent, creating artificial consequences. If the thing I want them to do holds water, then there should be natural consequences for me to help them look at.
Yeah.
If you do not get enough sleep. So I've definitely had experiences now that they've chosen to go to school, sleep when you feel like it, wake up when you feel like it, was always within reason. They would stay up till 11 o'clock and wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, it always kept a pretty natural, healthy thing. Cause we did do a lot of things, when they were homeschooled. Once they decided to go to, regular school, Lily will definitely have, Phoenix seems to thrive without a lot of sleep, but Lily will get kind of emotionally dysregulated and everything else. And so when that happens, we discuss, not in the moment she's dysregulated, but later we discuss, do you see the connection between not getting enough sleep and how difficult it is to regulate your emotions the next day? But that's for her to learn to work with.
And that's the experience thing I was talking about. That's like really healthy for her to have that experience and then have someone to guide through that. Like, hey, so these two things are connected. Like, you don't like this feeling of being dysregulated and anxious and out of control. How do you think that might come from the sleep that you didn't get last night?
Right.
Let's experiment with that. I think it's so helpful because then it's not just some random theory or idea that we're enforcing. It's like, you have to go to sleep because tomorrow you're going to be dysregulated. And then they put so much pressure on it. It's like allowing the experience to occur, the consequences to happen, and then an explanation and somebody that can guide you through that is so beneficial,
Right. And then when it comes to food stuff, because I think sometimes we can just sound like, wellness weirdos or whatever. The food that is sold in the boxes is made by capitalists, like greedy people for the most part. And it's literally designed to hijack the reward centers of your brain. And for the most part, it's nutrients deficient. And a lot of the nutrients that they add back in, me and my kids, I think probably you do too, but we have this MTHFR gene mutation, which can make us very sensitive to food that is quote unquote enriched, things that they have added back. And I have dealt with like really destructive sugar addiction throughout my life. So when the children were babies, like what my kids thought was cake was not cake. What my kids thought was juice was like extremely watered down. My kids simply did not know what soda was when they were younger, and within reason, I managed to not give Phoenix actual sugar until they were 3.5, probably when I was pregnant with Lily.
It's obviously much more difficult with the second child because the first child was already getting it. And I just did that through like when they're that small, you know, especially if they're at home. I worked, but like my ex-husband and I had opposite work schedules. So like they were still with us or with my parents, you know? And so I just didn't let them know that stuff existed. I didn't power struggle with them about it. I don't resonate with power struggling with kids. And so I just created a reality in which those things didn't exist. And that's only tenable for a few years in their early childhood and still before they start getting exposed to the world.
Which is probably the most important neurologically and everything.
Exactly.
Anyways.
And so I had seen, and this could have just been some Facebook facts that aren't true, but that if you can just like stop them from having sugar until they're a couple years old, you do increase the odds of them being able to sense when sugar makes them feel like shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, then, you know, if we were at a party and they had cake or whatever, I was never that kind of parent. I did eventually have to do that with gluten because Phoenix legitimately has celiac. But I have never engaged with, or I've worked hard not to engage with power struggles over that stuff because you make things more enticing that way. And it just, my goal is to teach them how to make good choices, not to dominate their reality.
Right.
And so now they are in public school. I mean, Lily's getting ready to come back and homeschool for a year, but you know, they have regular friends that live in the system that, you know, whose parents don't care about any of that stuff. And, you know, they're eating all kinds of things that I don't want them to eat. And so I don't buy it. And the rule is they're not supposed to have it in this house. I do still find wrappers and stuff in their room. It's not a hill I'm going to die on. But they are keenly aware of how that stuff makes them feel.
Yeah.
And they're continuing to do it anyway. And that just kind of is what it is. As long as I make sure that, you know, we make sure that we're feeding them an otherwise nutritious diet, it's not going to kill them. You know, I just don't want them to think that that's what food is because I was raised on things out of boxes and I have a really weird relationship with food and addiction and, you know, dopamine seeking and binge eating and all this other kind of stuff. And so I had to learn how to eat actual whole foods with nutrition in them later in my 30s. And my mother was skinny and only cared about skinny. And so she was of the belief that she could eat an absolute dog shit diet because she was skinny. And, you know, that I should have to be more cautious because I gain weight. And then she ended up like chronically ill. And I'm sorry. I just am of the belief that with all of this chronic illness, the things that we put in our body probably has something to do with it. It might not be all of it. At the minimum, it's a trigger thing. So I just think we're in an unprecedented time in reality, specifically here in the United States, because we do live inside of this kind of corporate hellscape in which you are constantly having to navigate. And I'm not trying to be negative when I keep calling it a hellscape. I'm just, this particular scenario is profit driven. Everything is profit driven. And so you're kind of having to play this sort of, I don't know, like Frogger game of navigating that everyone is trying to make like money and trick you on things and trying to make money. So they're literally doing tests on how crunchy the chips are to which will like make you eat the same bag, like the whole bag. And as someone who cannot stop from eating the whole bag, I just wanted to give my kids a better chance at that. But
full abstinence isn't the route, I think, though.
No.
It's playing the game a bit. The other thing I was thinking of, that we talked about a little bit, just because I'm thinking of like the most important things when you're conscious and awake and you've realized all the ways culture pushes certain things that are not healthy, that you want to protect your kids from it, but pure abstinence isn't the way. So letting them experience and then guiding through, here's the, you know, the consequences that come. Food is a big one. And then tech.
Yeah.
Obviously we've talked a lot about, but I feel like we have developed like kind of a somewhat of an interesting take on it. I mean, and you have a very interesting, you know, because you, with Lily and Phoenix, were doing this a bit before I was, with my daughter, but you say, you know, as raising, which I love, it's like we're raising adults. We're not raising like kids. We're trying to focus on like what's going to set them up for the reality that's coming in the most efficient way. And the hot topic is obviously these iPads and social media and digital stuff is so negative for kids, but I can't see a reality that we're going to where like that's not going to be there. It's going to be more and more involved. And so what is that balance between, you know, how much can they play with it? How much should they be learning it? And then also how much negativity comes from it, you know, like are there detriments to it, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm like right now like anti social media because I'm not on it. And I'm like, oh, I might never go back. So there are a lot of things that I don't know. I just look at it different. My kids, Phoenix was obsessed with the iPad, similar to how it wasn't an iPad back then. It was like an Amazon tablet or something. But Phoenix was obsessed with technology, and it was a special interest for them. And Lily got access to it a lot younger because it's just kind of that they were a unit, you know, and so Lily was 3.5 years younger. And Lily, I don't know, she's on her phone a decent amount, but if you give Lily the option to do literally anything else, Lily will forget where her phone is. Like, she wants to be engaged in real world stuff, you know. Phoenix is on the spectrum. I don't think Lily is. Phoenix definitely has very strong PDA. Lily has a moderate amount, but I think Lily is more just been raised in a very autonomous environment, so it doesn't. But Lily is much more receptive to like demands than Phoenix is, and Lily's just an extrovert, you know, who is actually really pretty well suited for the world we're coming out of, unfortunately. Phoenix found a way to circumvent most of the guardrails I put on the tech. You know, I didn't want YouTube for a very long time. I didn't want YouTube until Phoenix was like 10. My reasons were about like dulling Phoenix. Phoenix is incredibly intelligent. I didn't want to dull that with like mindless stuff. So when Phoenix was young, it was like watching unboxing videos, which I found unsettling for a long time. I don't feel that way now. And then there were other videos of just watching kids play with toys. And I just thought it was weird. I thought it was weird that the adults were making those. It gave me a creepy feeling. I now understand it in a different framework. But so I tried to prevent Phoenix from having, like, Phoenix was allowed to code and learn Spanish or Japanese or whatever. And I tried to control what was on there. But Phoenix at like 6 figured out how to download whatever apps they needed. You like watch YouTube while I was busy doing something else. When I come back in to check, they had figured out how to delete YouTube and delete the history. And, you know, there's a part of me that's like the more strict, the more fascist the government becomes, the smarter the people will be. They're not just going to lay down and take it, you know? And so kids are similar. And so I feel like kids are going to do what kids are going to do. You get to decide if you're a part of it or not. And so Phoenix is a terrible liar, or was at the time. So there's a point where I walked in the room and, I don't know, was going to say like, hey, do you want to go to the park or something? And Phoenix goes, I'm not on YouTube. And so that's how I found out. And then, you know, they spilled their guts and I found out all this other stuff. So I was just like, okay, well, it just kind of is what it is. I, as someone who was exposed to a lot of things at a very young age, I don't know, those aren't my like primary concerns. My kids were educated on sex offenders. Unfortunately, I had to have that talk with them at a very young age. And specifically around internet safety. I have someone close to me who went the abstinence route with that. I think we've talked about this before. And her daughter was sneaking and doing internet stuff behind her back because I think they're going to do that. Like, they can literally just find an old iPhone and get on Wi-Fi with it.
And so while my kids were super educated on adults pretend to be children, on, you know, adult, like it's a predator until you've seen the child face to face. Like I had to teach them the dark parts of that. I also had to teach them the dark parts of that with regular people because I was molested as a kid, you know? And this person close to me's daughter almost got kidnapped because she didn't have, her mom was going the abstinence route, and the kid was just had snuck a device that she didn't know about, was on these apps, did not know that adults pretend to be kids, and thought she had a boyfriend that was a grown ass man who was not far from her house. Yeah. And so,
this is the part that we have talked about before, but I think it's just when you think about it, I don't know if the fix is like abstinence completely from these things, because then at some point they're going to get them, or they're, you know, behind your back, and then they don't know the guardrails, they don't know the dangers of it, and so then that's when you get real problems. And because they're being secretive, you just never know what's going to happen if it's happening. I think some adults like still can't handle the internet and what comes with it. I mean, you're off social media now because it delivered something that you did not want to see, and it affected you. I think in general, the internet has provided a transparency of the diversity of reality and experience, and the darkness of that is hard to stomach because we're not shown it daily. And so I think that's what is like the difficulty with having kids start to play with some of these devices and things so early, is because there's kind of unfettered access on some of those. Obviously you can limit that, and you can, you know, try to get rid of some of it. But I do think one of the safest things is to, when age appropriate, educate them with difficult things that, like, you know, seem difficult at the time, but educate them to have the awareness that what they're using has potential for bad things. And if they have that awareness, they're less likely to mess up with the thing. But it's just kind of having to be okay on some level with, we're moving into a reality that's like, it's transparent. It's like, there's a lot, we're going to see a lot of things. And I don't know, I've talked about this before, and it always feels like I'm bumping up against a like bad thing for some reason, or it's perceived as like irresponsible. But I'm not saying like show kids, you know, let them see dark things, like extremely dark things that even adults don't want to see. But we are moving into a reality where just 10 years from now, when kids are going to have the internet and the way AI is, like, that's going to be there. So if at this point, there's an attempt to educate in whatever way makes sense at the time per their age and their maturity, like, that is the best route. But it is very difficult. It's the equivalent of, like, I guess, like when we were young, or when I was young, like the birds and the bees conversation that your parents had to have with you once you were hitting puberty, which I never got, by the way, because it was just too awkward, right? Yeah. But then I had to go figure that out in a weird way, you know, like kind of hearing from friends and then going on the internet and looking. And it would have been nice to have a little bit of like maturity from my parents to just kind of break the ice and guide me through. And it would have developed a lot more trust with them. I wouldn't have been maybe sneaking behind their backs to do some of the things that, you know, I thought were not okay because they didn't talk to me about it, you know.
My kids' relationship with social media, which I've not been crazy strict about. I'm crazy strict about your profile has to be private, and you're not allowed to have any followers that you do not know personally. You're not allowed to build connections with people that you do not know personally.
And you explained why.
Or that you have not seen on FaceTime.
Yeah, because there are dangerous people out there.
Because there are dangerous people out there, 100%. And so...
a lot of parents are afraid to tell their kids that.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, had my parents educated me about that, I would have been hip to the fact that I was being abused a lot earlier.
Right. And that's why I don't, it's like a hard thing for parents to do that for some reason. They think they're going to scare the kids, but it's a wonderful educational point.
Yeah. So, the way that my kids relate to social media, it's a lot less influential on them than it is on me. And they have a lot healthier relationship with it than
Yeah.
I would say even I do.
Totally.
So when the extremely graphic video of someone bleeding out was on the internet a couple weeks ago, Phoenix was at school, Lily was home helping us plant bamboo. And we saw it. And then when I picked Phoenix up from and then Phoenix went straight to driver's ed. So when I picked Phoenix up from driver's ed, I was like, do you know about what's all over the internet? And Phoenix said, my teacher said something about it. I was like, I would prefer y'all don't watch that video. And Phoenix was like, yeah, I'm not trying to see that video. I'll just stay off of those apps. And, you know, that's probably the result of Phoenix seeing things they didn't want to see throughout. But like, they just have like I don't know, like they're far less conditioned by it than I catch myself getting. Like they're both far more. Lily's in a completely different side of the internet, but Phoenix, who is, you know, very voyeuristic and wants to understand how everything works and knows a lot of like niche internet culture. Phoenix is, far more suspicious that things are misinformation, disinformation, meant to dysregulate you, whatever. And Phoenix is like, I'm not interested in seeing that. I'm not going to see that. Lily is much more into the like artistic, like making aesthetic videos side of, you know, the internet, and really doesn't. Lily is weirdly like very sheltered. Now, what have I seen have a profound impact on Lily's self-esteem? School.
Yeah.
School. Kids telling her forehead's too big, that she's fat. You know, that she's
it's like so crazy to me, because
putting kids into that environment has been like that's why I'm taking her out right now.
And most parents are abstaining them from the devices and putting them in the school, because like that, this is the safe place. This is where you need to learn how to, but like, I mean, I gotta be honest too. Like when I was in school, that's where all the pressure from like being popular or being bullied or like looking right and being made fun of, like that shit really influenced you and changes you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that environment has just only gotten weirder and more strict and more controlling and more expectation. And it's just frustrating when you see people like praising that as such a great thing,
as the pinnacle of socializing children.
Yeah, and that's, and the internet and the connectedness on there is so bad when. I mean, your kids have such a healthy relationship with it, and I've thought about it in the past. I think when I first met you, when they had like kind of unfettered access, I was like, I wonder if they're watching weird shit on there, you know? And it's become pretty clear that like they've come across it, but they like are very much like, that's gross, or I don't like seeing that thing. And it's funny because like when I was a kid, it's like, because it was not allowed and not talked about, and there was like a no thing, I was actively more interested in it, you know, until it gets to a point where it's like, I have to realize this is unhealthy, or I don't like this, but I've kind of already been affected by it by then, you know.
Now, I have females. I have girls and a non-binary. If I had male children, this conversation would be different.
It's a different story for sure.
All I had to tell my female children is like, porn is fake. That's a fake, gross thing. That's not how that is supposed to be. That's not what sex is about. And this is deeply, you know, I'm pretty
not in a religious way, but I don't think there's any benefit to porn personally, is my personal take as someone who has consumed it. And, you know, I'm the anarchist part of me is like everyone should do whatever they want to do, but I do think it has had like kind of a negative impact probably on a lot of people. I know people addicted to it, and, you know, I've seen people really change in that addiction. So I'm sure it's like anything else, like, you know, if used in moderation, it's fine. But I think on the minds of young men, it definitely is, you know, I think it distorts like what sex is supposed to be, what everyone's parts are supposed to look like, you know. And so I haven't had to deal with this because I didn't have male children, and then I also think a lot of this like red pill, you know, I put a lot of effort into understanding different parts of culture. And so I've consumed a lot of all of those kind of niche parts of the
so
right wing.
When you say red pill, you mean like letting full access to it?
No, red pill is that like
I mean, I know what
incel type stuff. No, red pill is a genre of like, I don't know, like right wing misogynist kind of.
Oh.
So I think it, in my personal opinion, is a pendulum swing from, you know, I don't know if I want to open that can of worms right now, but I would be very, I would probably be a lot more involved in a male child's social media at this point in reality.
Yeah, I agree.
Or how much time they're spending on video games or whatever, because I do feel like I feel like a lot of boys are feeling very disenfranchised from the culture right now. And probably our son wouldn't feel that way because of like, you know, the way that we are consciously engaged in what their consciousness is doing. But there is a lot of, like, to me, much scarier pockets of the internet for males specifically.
Yeah.
And the disenfranchisement that they're feeling from culture as it shifts from a masculine driven culture to a feminine driven culture, you know, a lot of anti-man sentiment. While I understand where that's coming from, you know, the way that that's being internalized for a lot of males is not healthy, you know, because shame is not actually a like productive method of helping people evolve into healthier behavior. Just, it might make you feel good to shame people, but you're actually accessing a completely different part of their consciousness. So
right.
I think that boys growing up and young men growing up in this specific cultural shift are finding community in the exact place that we don't want them to, you know? And so by painting all boys as inherently violent or inherently abusive or inherently stupid or whatever, a lot of them are getting red pilled because they're vulnerable to that. And so that red pill stuff is just the kind of really it's like incel, anti-woman type shit. I try to get you to watch a documentary about it, but I voyeuristically watch a lot of this stuff. I wouldn't want my sons in those kind of 4chan pockets of whatever, because I think that they can pretty quickly drift from a healthy reality, and then, like I said, the reality that they are experiencing is going to become a feedback loop of that. Now, I don't know, because I don't know any boys that have gotten into that, and so I don't know what their home situation is like and how anchored they are to their parents. Going back to the, you know, early childhood becoming very anchored to me. All of my kids, even my oldest, there's a lot of trust there with me. And so there's not a lot going on in their reality that I'm not privy to, you know? And I think that is another advantage to non-punitive parenting, is that like shit that I never, ever, ever would have talked to my parents about, my kids talk to me about, because there's a trust there that like, I'm not your warden, I'm your guide. Yeah,
that's the biggest thing to me, because that's where a lot of like the secretive and darker stuff that can really affect a kid can happen, is when they don't have the trust, they're doing things secretively behind your back and they don't feel like they can talk to you about it. I think that's a huge issue, that a lot of the culture's like way of parenting kind of like really does enforce that, this authoritative kind of warden thing. It feels, a lot of parents feel like they're supposed to do that to teach the kid authority or something, you know. I don't know what that is, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I would ever be afraid of, is like if my kid can't trust me, you know. And I think the ways that I traverse that is just trying to always be open, particularly if I do, you know, I'm out of space and I kind of snap in saying something, or I'm sharp and quick with them, that I, you know, reapproach that when I'm calm and apologize and explain and like overly communicate. Those things I think was what really does retain trust over time, you know, because they can, I think just that's where it comes from. But like I didn't have a distrust with my parents, but I just don't think there was a lot of, I'd say with my mom, I actually always had trust, but like my dad was pretty distant. And so there was not a lot of desire to share anything with him, you know.
But like when you were having relationship difficulties or difficulties with your friends, did you go home and talk to your parents about it?
No, not really. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that wasn't necessarily, I didn't trust, I guess maybe it's part of trust, but like my mom just wasn't engaged because she was
very busy,
a day job taking care of my dad, and like just didn't have any space. So it wasn't something on my mind. And I would say that's, you know, something that probably comes from just not it being a habit that my parents would ask about what's going on in my life. So when that like didn't happen long enough, it was like, oh, they don't really care, so I don't need to tell them. It wasn't like, I don't trust you, I'm not going to tell you, but it was just like, that didn't come across my mind, you know.
I didn't tell my parents anything, because my parents were, how I perceived my parents was constantly scanning everything I was talking about to find something to restrict me.
Yeah.
And so whether or not that was true, who knows? But my mom, you know, I didn't trust for other reasons, because she was on drugs. And then when I lived with my dad and my stepmom, it just felt like their whole life revolved around grounding me. That's probably not what it was, but as an autonomy centered young person, like I don't know. Like my kids get home and they cannot wait to get to us so that they can tell us what's going on with their friends, what happened in their life. And there are things they'll end up saying that are like things that we don't like or things that we don't want. And it's just very open to be like, all right, well, I'm not stoked on that, but you'll figure it out, you know?
And I think that does come too from at least expressing that there is like a genuine curiosity about what's going on in their lives.
Right.
You know, like, and I can forget to do that sometimes when, you know, the kids are going to school and they're kind of gone all the time. And then by the evening, I'm kind of wanting to do my own thing. And, you know, usually it's at dinner or something, but I think that's always like a really great place to just, when you do show a little bit of interest, it's like they're more apt to be like excited to talk about something, because like it seems like you actually care, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like a subtle, energetic thing. It's very easy to do. Just like ask a couple questions about something that's going on, you know? My parents just never really did that. But again, there was no time. There was just like, I was in a very separate thing, you know?
Yeah. So in my experience, when it comes to tech, they are, if there's something in real life that we can do, they will drop the tech. They are not obsessed with it. You know, and it's a lot of different things for them. Like Phoenix makes music. Phoenix makes digital art that is really advanced and good. Phoenix learned Japanese. Like what they do with the tech is pretty, you know, Lily makes great videos, but they're also both, you know, you and I met during the pandemic. And so, or right before the pandemic, but we moved in together during the pandemic. So they were heavy on the tech because we were in the middle of nowhere where they didn't know anybody. And, you know, they crave to be out in the world. They're homeschooled and, you know, craved to go to school and to be out and to be doing things. And these are kids who have had unfettered access. And so it's interesting to watch
parents who are really trying to control the tech have kids who are obsessed with it. And I would say your daughter is obsessed with it. And I think it's the same reason that my kids are obsessed with talkies, is because I have created a tension with the junk food, you know, and I've just made it seem more appealing than it is. And that was definitely my experience as a kid. My parents had so many fucking rules that it just made all of these things way more appealing to me. I had to go learn it myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the case with Sonny, because it's, you know, in the beginning, it wasn't there when she was just here using it. It's like when I started realizing that there was some strict stuff going on in the other house, that she started focusing on, like, well, can I do this now or not? And when's the next time I'm going to be able to do it? And like a real emphasis on it. And yeah, it's hard, because then it's like this house becomes a place where she's allowed to do it as much as she wants. So then now she's doing it even more because she's trying to soak up the time when she goes back, you know? And so then it's starting to trigger okay, well, this is a little too much, darling.
Yeah.
And so then now I'm having to enforce it, or trying to. And, but then you get it's like hard too with kids with special interests, where it's like you see, it's like a PDA driven thing. It's like that's the one place that they can control and not be dictated to. So there's a freedom and a peace that's happening that, like, I'm very much into, and finding that balance, you know. But I do think, the struggle has become much stronger because the two houses are different, you know?
Yeah.
And it is a nuanced thing. I don't think there's one way fixes it all, but I always am curious when I see parents that are like complete abstinence and vilification of it, because I'm just like, what's going to happen when they turn 18, and where do you think the world is going? It's only going to get more that way. Where will we be more balanced as a culture by the time it gets more? I hope so, but it is a very like weird time to have kids having access to such a open, transparent internet. But like, I definitely know, I mean, the abstinence route doesn't seem to resonate with me. I'm sometimes jealous of parents that are like super engaged and have them in, like, you know, outdoors all the time and activities and all of that. But finding the balance and educating them, getting them to be able to play with those things. I'm just amazed at how kids figure that shit out so quick. Like,
that was something that stood out to me, because I wasn't planning on. I didn't get Phoenix. I got Phoenix a tablet at 3.5, and it was for, it might have been 4 actually, because I think it was Christmas. The Christmas right before they turned 4, and it was because I was pregnant with Lily. I was so sick that I couldn't play or go do anything, and I knew I was going to be sick for months. And Phoenix was super understimulated, and so. But Phoenix was always drawn, and like Phoenix at a year old could pick up the phone and unlock it and whatever. And so I thought it was interesting that there's something about these kids that
they naturally
understand tech without you teaching it to them.
And I thought that people were just saying that until I watched Sunny do it, like over a little bit of time, that I was like, because I had to explain a couple things early on, and then she just intuitively started figuring things out, and very quickly had this like motor, like, thing with her hands. She could just do multitask and like think, and it's hard to not just be like, oh, like you naturally have the instincts to work with this thing. It must be because there's a reality coming where like this is going to be very involved, for good or worse, I don't know, but like that convinced me that I was like, okay, well, they're supposed to have these things at some point, you know?
Yeah. So we watched a show called Welcome to Plathville. Plathville, and
my new obsession,
Mark's favorite show, Mark's special interest. And I don't know, they're on like the end of season 7 or 8, and the basic premise is that these parents homeschooled their 7, 8, 9 kids, I don't remember how many kids, completely outside of society. And so they were homeschooled. They had no tech. They had no sugar. They didn't have screens at all. They had like a projector or something that they would watch a family movie, but they were also like Christians. So everything had to go through everything had to be like pure or whatever. But basically these kids were completely cut off from the outside world. And so the show starts with the oldest of the family like crossing into adulthood. And, now most of them are adults. There's a few that are still kids, but you're seeing the consequences of keeping these kids cut off from the entire world out there, And I mean, the thing about like homeschooling kids and keeping them cut off from tech is they all can play multiple musical instruments. They know how to work on a farm. They can build things with their hands. There's all these things, but they also are pretty dysfunctional in relationships. Now, a lot of that could come from being raised as a fundamentalist Christian, but they're missing a lot of things, that like you need in the world that they've gone out to. And they're also very drawn to that world. And so it is of questionable benefit to have kept them out of that, And so it's like we're watching this 19-year-old boy get on social media for the first time, and he's posting like we were posting on Facebook in 2008. You know what I mean? He doesn't have any of the social awareness of the culture that he's stepping into. And, watching them date or try to have friendships, it's and whatever. A lot of that stuff's going to be an expression of how your parents were. However, the purpose of being out in the world, whatever world that is, the internet or at school or whatever, is, you're going to learn from more mirrors and only having your parents as a mirror, which, whatever. I think people who are anti-tech are not necessarily homeschooling, but as a homeschool mom, like socialization, real, authentic, organic socialization was very important to me. So it was getting together with local community co-ops and doing field trips and Valentine's Day and Halloween. And you know what I mean? Like I had access to a lot of kids their age. So it was heavy on the socialization. I don't think public school provides a healthy, so I think it's like a prison yard, and that's why the kids are horrific to each other. And I think you shouldn't put 25 kids all the exact same age into school, like into environments like that. I think that if we were going to do something like school, it needs to be teaching them emotional regulation, about their projections and stuff, And so whatever, in many ways, I think the internet is a better place to learn socialization than school, because if someone's bullying you on the internet, you can block them, but you can't do that to the kid who's telling you he's going to blow up your house at school. So, yeah. So I don't know. I ultimately, if it's possible to let them make their own decision, I let them make their own decision. We did make the call to take Lily out of school for a year. I think that she went into 6th grade. She should technically be in 7th grade, but we started her a year behind. And I think that 6th and 7th grade are the worst years for social pressure and self-esteem. And we're seeing the effects on her personality and her mental health as a result of that. And so she's coming out of school Friday. I'm going to let her go to her first dance. And then we are going to homeschool her to finish 6th and 7th grade in the next 9 months. And then next year she can go back in 8th grade. Because then it's just, I don't know, 8th grade is 6th and 7th were the fucking worst. And they just are the worst. And I can't with the amount of bullying and shit. I can see it impacting her. And so it's something she really wants. So this is an example of us making a decision that's like, it's just our call. But you have agency here in that if you finish 6th and 7th grade, which by the way is very easy outside of public school, if you finish 6th and 7th grade, you can go back next year into 8th grade. But if you don't finish both grades, then you got to stay home for 2 years. And so she still has some agency and choice. And I don't know, I feel like she's relieved, even though she's not admitting that. But that is after watching her experience a lot of emotional stress in school, a lot of anxiety, a lot of just, the kids are shitty, dude. They're fucking shitty.
Well, and that's the hard thing. I think a lot of kids are nowadays, it's the anxiety thing. You know, I mean, there's a part of it that's like, it's trendy to be like, I'm anxious, I got anxiety as you're more adolescent. But like young kids, there's a lot of young kids having like rogue anxiety and emotional things from a lot of the system-based elements, you know, that I think
what's
is
that
like,
saying? It's not a good sign to be emotionally well-adjusted in a profoundly sick society or something, you know?
And I think that's like a lot of these kids are coming in and they're not meant for that, but some of us parents are still just thinking that's what you got to do. You just go to public school because of this is what you socialize, whatever. But then they're showing like this isn't, something's wrong here, you know, and it's a thing to figure out, you know, in every individual kid. But it is a weird thing to notice that like you can tell some kids' souls are like, what is this decrepit thing you're putting me into? And then you can look at culture and like, oh, this is dying. The system is dying. So it's only a matter of time. And I think some kids' souls are going, hey, don't put me in this dying ship. Please set me up for success by finding an alternative route. But it's fun co-parenting with somebody that has a different view.
Yeah, or you just get my situation where me and my ex are both pretty anti-system, and so we're like, cool, we agree on homeschooling, and then my kids are like, I would love to LARP in the Matrix,
and then
I'm
you
like,
get that.
okay, fine. I will say, like, Phoenix doesn't internalize it, you know?
Yeah,
Phoenix is like, I wanted to be a theater kid. I can't be a theater kid at homeschool, and so I don't. And then Phoenix is just so insanely smart.
Yeah, he can
that
just traverse.
He's just the kid that can show up, never do his homework, get straight A's on the test. All the teachers love him, like, and then he gets to be in theater, and he doesn't take any of it in. Like, if the teacher's mean to him, he's like, this fucking dumb fuck. Like, Phoenix just doesn't. Phoenix is very solid as a person, but. And then Phoenix looks like it's like emo queer kid. And so Phoenix gets horribly bullied and is just doesn't take, is just like, yeah, okay, you're a fucking dork. You think I give a shit what you think about me? He's just I don't know, a very solid person.
Capricorn projector.
Yeah. There's a lot of Capricorn placements and just kind of doesn't take shit off of people like that. But Lily is a lot more I don't know, open, I guess. Phoenix has a lot of defined centers. Lily has a lot of open centers. Phoenix is splenic and Lily is emotional authority. So
I've got the pea spirits haunting me.
oh, okay, is that what's that?
Are you done?
All right, yeah, this is gonna be fun to edit 5 hours later.
Yeah.
All right, love you, bye.
Love you, bye.